Good morning, everybody. I'm David Steele, Chairman of the Oversight Board, and I'd like to welcome everybody present with us online to this public meeting of the Financial Oversight Board Financial Oversight and Management Board for Puerto Rico, which is being held by video conference. As always at our meetings, I'd like to ask everybody connected to the video conference to cooperate in conducting a productive meeting, including first and foremost, keeping yourself on mute during the video conference. Before we get started, I want to first welcome Governor Pedro Pierluisi, who will be serving on the board. It is a great honor to have the governor serving with us personally as his own representative on the board, and we are very much looking forward to many meetings like this one where we can discuss the critically important issues of Puerto Rico together.
Well, thank you, Chairman. It is both my duty and my pleasure to be acting as be an active member of the board, ex officio member of the board. So I look forward to participating in all future meetings, public meetings and other meetings of the board.
Thanks again, Governor. I'd also like to extend a very warm welcome to our newest member of the Oversight Board, Antonio Medina. We're still working through the onboarding process with Antonio, the process that is customary with all board members as required by law and by the board's bylaws and procedures. It's taken a little bit longer than we'd hoped due to the holidays and due to the fact that Antonio is a former governmental leader who has business in Puerto Rico, but we expect it to be completed very soon, and we're greatly looking forward to having Antonio's invaluable input and expertise during this meeting and all of our subsequent meetings in the coming years. We're sure that Antonio will be an integral part of this board and its mission to get Puerto Rico out of bankruptcy, to establish fiscal discipline, and to see Puerto Rico really start growing again as required and called for by PROMESA. More than perhaps any other member of the Oversight Board, Antonio has ample experience as a public official in Puerto Rico, having served as executive director of PRIDCO from 2012 to 2016. In that position, he managed the island's largest real estate portfolio with around 1,500 properties. He also was a member of the cabinet and the economic development team under then-Governor Alejandro Garcia Padilla. As with the recent appointments of Justin Peterson, Betty Rosa, and John Nixon, the appointment of Antonio Medina to the Oversight Board will bring a fresh perspective to the workings of the board that should prove key in tackling the challenges that, as we all know, the island still faces. We're very excited about embarking upon this new chapter of the Oversight Board as we continue working for the good of the people of Puerto Rico. A very warm welcome, Antonio.
Thank you very much, Professor Steele. It's truly an honor for me to be here, especially as the representative of all Puerto Ricans, both entrepreneurs, as the public servants, but more importantly, all the people in need in Puerto Rico. And we do have a lot of people that we need to take into account and have a lot of empathy for them, as the social issues in Puerto Rico have been worsening over the years. I joined the board with a lot of urgency because the problems that we have in Puerto Rico have been unresolved for many years. We've had multiple issues, from bankruptcies to hurricanes to earthquakes to pandemics. And it's time that our fellow Puerto Ricans start feeling that we have a better future, and that better future becomes a better present. Our objectives, I believe, must be to complete the debt restructuring as quickly as possible, and achieve, together with Governor Pierluisi, the balanced budgets required for us, Puerto Rico, to become, again, part of the markets and to be able to obtain debt in the open markets, and to put an end to this fiscal control board. My personal priorities as a member of the board will include using Title V to its maximum extent to drive economic growth. We do need a revitalization coordinator as required by PROMESA. We need to have a list of priority projects to move our economy. And we need to provide fast-track permitting processes to ensure that the projects that drive the economy can get done as quickly as possible. We have an unprecedented amount of capital coming from Washington, which I've lost count. It's over $60 billion at this point. So I truly look forward to work with the current administration and its leaders to ensure the fastest possible deployment in the appropriate way, so we can fix our schools, fix our hospitals, fix our roads, fix our energy sources, and all other services that our people have been suffering for so many years because they are not where they need to be. There are also some federal matters that I believe this board needs to be part of. Current cases like SSI, SNAP, Medicare, Medicaid are critical for the US residents that live in Puerto Rico. And I believe that the board has a critical role in ensuring that whether through the Supreme Court route or through the legislative route in the Biden administration, we achieve equity for all of us in Puerto Rico in all these programs. We need to make sure that we get into the manufacturing discussions that are happening in the US right now. We need to ensure that the tax code for the United States allows companies to thrive in Puerto Rico and does not become a way to persuade companies to move away from Puerto Rico, but instead to come to Puerto Rico and use our human capital. And probably the most important subject to me as a member of this board is education. We lose over 40% of our students in the public education system. We need those people, we need those young people to rebuild our economy and to rebuild our future. So I want to work with Professor Rosa, and again, along with the governor and his team, to ensure that we can drive change and truly help Puerto Ricans have a brighter future. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. We look forward to working together on all of these things for the benefit of the people of Puerto Rico. I'll now conduct a roll call to determine which members are present in the video conference and whether we have a quorum for the purposes of the meeting. And I will go in the order of appointment to the board rather than alphabetical board. So starting with Dr. Andrew Biggs. Are you here?
I'm present.
Thank you. Mr. Justin Peterson?
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Betty Rosa?
Present.
Thank you. Judge Arthur Gonzalez?
Present.
And I should note with Judge Gonzalez, although he is one of us old timers, this meeting also marks his return to the board. I think of Arthur as having had a brief vacation, and it's wonderful to have him back, or has been wonderful to have him back again. Mr. John Nixon?
Thank you.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Antonio Medina?
Here, present. Thank you.
And then our ex officio member, Governor Pedro Pierluisi.
Present.
Thank you, Governor. I'm happy to say that everybody is present, and therefore we have a quorum, and the meeting is now called to order. I'd like to ask Mr. Jaime El Khoury, the General Counsel for the board, to act as secretary for the meeting, as usual, if Jaime, you are once again willing.
Yes, I accept. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jaime. Thanks to all of you who are in attendance at this public meeting, which, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is being held by video conference. And thanks to those who are watching the live stream via the board's website, which is www.oversightboard.pr.gov. I'm pleased to say that, as usual, the audio of this meeting via the webcast is available both in English and in a simultaneous Spanish translation, as well as being translated in sign language. If you log in on the English language website, the audio will be in English. If you log in to the Spanish website, you'll hear the simultaneous translation. Again, as usual, the Oversight Board will be handling the public's questions and comments through a form that's available on the website, the board's website. You should be able to get to it by clicking the webcast page. If you fill out the form, including your name and any question or comment that you'd like to give us, the board will, towards the end of this meeting, answer those questions and respond to the comments during the assigned time period. The public will have, from the time the meeting starts or started to up to 15 minutes prior to the public comments period to share their questions or comments on the form. Hopefully we'll be able to get to all of the questions, but if we don't have time to get to all of them, they will be answered. We'll provide answers to any questions we don't get to during the meeting, and we'll put those on the website. So there will be answers to every question and responses to every comment. Before we get started with the business of the meeting, let me briefly go through the agenda that we have for the meeting. Today we'll be considering the following 9 topics as part of the board's public meeting. First order of business will be approval of the minutes from our last public meeting and from executive sessions of the board. Second, we'll do administrative matters. Third, we'll have an update from the executive director. Fourth, we'll handle some Section 204C of PROMESA reapportionment or reprogramming issues. Fifth will be Section 204B contract review. 6 will be a Section 205 recommendation involving recommendation to the governor involving the transportation sector. 7th will be an update on the Department of Education time and attendance project. 8th will be the public comment period, and then 9th will be any other matters that come before the board. So our first order of business is to approve the minutes of the board's last public meeting, which was held a little over a month ago on December 18, 2020. The proposed minutes are included in the meeting materials, and then there'll be there is a second set of minutes that we need to approve, which are from executive sessions that the board held on January 9, 2021, January 24, 2021, and January 28, 2021. So January 9, January 24, and January 28. Does anybody have questions or comments about any of these sets of minutes, the minutes from the last meeting or the minutes from the executive sessions? Looks like there are no questions or comments. Would somebody be willing to make a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Justin. Would somebody second?
Second.
And I'll read, or actually, Justin, can you read the motion? I can read it.
I'll just let me ad lib because I don't have the material in front of me. I move that we approve the minutes.
Very nicely done. And that would include the public meeting minutes and the executive session meetings. And I think it was Andrew that was it Andrew that seconded?
But I will.
I guess we didn't get to the second. So Andrew seconds. And I will conduct a voice vote for approval. And I'll do this with each of the issues, starting with yes, then no, then abstain. So starting with yes, all in favor, please say yes.
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 All opposed, please say no. Any abstentions, please say abstain.
Yeah, Professor Skill, I'll abstain from these and other votes as I have not been an active member of the board till today.
Thank you, Antonio. And we will mark that in the minutes for this meeting.
Thank you.
So this motion is approved then. So second, we have at least one administrative, looks like we just have one administrative matter, which has to do with executive sessions.
Sure. I would like to make the following motion. Between the adjournment of this meeting and the opening of the board's next public meeting, the board may consider in executive session any and all matters it is authorized to consider under PROMESA, including 1, any certification determinations authorized by PROMESA, including certification determinations under Section 206 of PROMESA. 2nd, any submissions or authorizations authorized by PROMESA. And 3rd, any filings authorized under Title III of PROMESA in each case that are set forth as part of the vote to convene such executive session. The board may also act by unanimous written consent between meetings in accordance with the bylaws, with such consent to include consent by electronic transmission.
Thank you, Andrew. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, John. Once again, I'll ask for a voice vote, starting with yes, then no, then abstain. Will all in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, say
Yes.
no. Oh, sorry. And any abstentions?
Same thing. I'll vote throughout the meeting and abstain. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. So this motion on executive sessions passes as well. Our third agenda item is an update from the Executive Director, Ms. Natalie Jaresko. Thank you, Ms. Jaresko. Natalie?
Thank you, Chairman Scale, Oversight Board members, and dear Governor. With the beginning of the new year, it is time for the Oversight Board to work with the government of Puerto Rico to develop 2 critical documents that guide the financial recovery of Puerto Rico, as required by PROMESA. Those are the Certified Fiscal Plan and the Certified Budget. These 2 documents work together to provide fiscal balance and a pathway for economic prosperity for the island. Can someone put up the slides? Under Section 201 of PROMESA, the board certifies a Commonwealth fiscal plan. We update this plan annually prior to the annual budget process to take into account factual changes, this is not it, factual changes, new information, and other required updates. PROMESA requires the board to ensure that this fiscal plan balances 14 different priorities and provides a method to achieve fiscal balance and renewed access to capital markets. The board carefully addresses these priorities, which include ensuring the funding of essential public services, providing for the elimination of structural deficits, improving fiscal governance, accountability, and internal controls, providing for capital expenditures and investments necessary to promote economic growth, and respecting the relative lawful priorities or lawful liens. I'm going to wait for the slides to catch up for me. I apologize. We're on slide 4. Apart from the Commonwealth, there are 18 other agencies, instrumentalities, and municipalities that have independent fiscal plans and budgets. And you see the list here includes a variety of public corporations and 10 municipalities as part of a pilot program. Next slide, please. Once the fiscal plan is certified, under Section 202 of PROMESA, we proceed to certify the budget. So go to slide 6. Just so there's a common understanding, The process of certifying a fiscal plan is interactive. PROMESA provides explicitly for the interaction between this board and the government of Puerto Rico in the development of a fiscal plan. The key dates for the Commonwealth, 2021 fiscal plan update process, and the fiscal year 22 budget certification have already been shared with the government, and the fiscal plan update process will follow a calendar. The government will submit its proposed fiscal plan to the Oversight Board by February 20th. The Oversight Board must certify that that proposed plan satisfies the requirements that I mentioned earlier under PROMESA. If the Oversight Board determines that the government's proposal does not fully satisfy the requirements under PROMESA, it will send the government a notice of violation with recommendations for revisions, and the government then will submit a revised fiscal plan. Should the Oversight Board determine the government's revised fiscal plan does not satisfy completely the requirements under PROMESA, the Oversight Board is required to develop and submit to the governor and the legislature its own fiscal plan that it certifies and that is deemed approved by the governor and the legislature. I want to note that the new legislative leadership has let the Oversight Board know that it wishes to have input into the development of the certified fiscal plan. And we have encouraged the leadership and the legislators to send their input to both the government and the Oversight Board for consideration by February 20th. For the budget, the Oversight Board begins now in January the process based on the existing fiscal plan, so as to have sufficient time for the budget to be formed, despite the fact that in the end, on June 30th, the final certified budget will have to be consistent with the newly certified fiscal plan in April this year. So the board has already sent a revenue forecast for the purposes of budgeting government expenditures to the government. And the board has established a calendar of next steps and deadlines for the submission of the budget by the government, which drafts the annual budget to be shared and submits their first proposal on February 2nd. Then we go through a similar process to the one with the fiscal plan, where the Oversight Board reviews the proposed budget. If it does not satisfy the requirements under PROMESA and is not consistent with the fiscal plan, the Oversight Board issues a notice of violation to the government with recommendations for revisions to the applicable budget. The government then resubmits a budget to the Financial Oversight and Management Board for review, and the board submits finally a compliant budget to the legislature, which is then reviewed, analyzed, and amended as the legislature requires. The legislature then submits that budget to the Oversight Board for its review to determine again consistency with the now newly certified and updated certified fiscal plan. By June 30th, the Oversight Board must certify a budget consistent with the certified fiscal plan in place. It's important to note that the fiscal plan starts by establishing an expense baseline. Can you go back to the previous slide, please? We're somehow off. And that baseline assumes no reforms and grows over time as would be expected as a result of traditional spending patterns. So what you see on the slide in front of you is a red line, which is what the baseline is. And that baseline is established on the basis of the fiscal year 2018 budget of the government. We then grow that baseline. That red number includes various macroeconomic factors such as inflation and population growth. And it shows what would happen if policymakers continued to do as they've been doing in the past, applying no reforms, no increases in terms of revenues, and no changes in expenditures. If there were no change, that is the deficit, the baseline deficit that one could expect. However, the next line to look at is the gray one, because as the certified fiscal plan starts adding structural reforms to increase the amount of resources available to increase economic growth, and then takes fiscal measures to reduce costs, you can see that fiscal balance is restored, can be restored. You go to the next slide. So taken together, the fiscal plan establishes 4 goals consistent with PROMESA. There are 5 real core goals that we take into account. First, identifying specific actions needed to reform the structure of the economy and create conditions for growth. Those are what we call structural reforms, and they're all based on trying to get the economy to be larger, to create new investment space, new jobs, and resulting in, hopefully, increased revenues for the government to use in meeting the needs of the people of Puerto Rico. Second, creating a leaner, more affordable government. Third, increasing transparency and control over government finances. Fourth, directing resources to frontline service delivery and investment in economic growth. And fifth, maximizing the impact of federal investments in Puerto Rico. So first, let me review how we grow the size of the economy to increase economic opportunity and resulting in growth of government revenues. The 5 structural reforms included in the fiscal plan that are enhancing growth and, as a result, growing revenues available to the government to provide services to the people of Puerto Rico. Next page. First, human capital and welfare reform. Puerto Rico has one of the lowest labor participation rates in the world. This reform works to increase the well-being and self-sufficiency of all Puerto Ricans, increasing the quality and effective and competitiveness of the workforce, enabling investment and facilitating economic modernization. Second, something mentioned by Mr. Medina earlier today, kindergarten through 12 education reform. With this reform, the goal is for all students to succeed in school and upon graduation by raising the quality of Puerto Rico's public school system. Third, the ease of doing business structural reforms. These set of reforms are meant to improve the conditions for business, attract new investments, create new quality jobs. So by removing bureaucratic permitting red tape, improving the processes by which residents pay taxes, improving the overall business environment, the Puerto Rican economy can grow. And as a result, that growth results in increased revenues in the fiscal plan. The fourth structural reform in the fiscal plan is power sector reform, improving the affordability, availability, reliability of energy for families and businesses. It's achieved by transforming and modernizing the delivery of affordable power, restructuring the power grid to implement a mix of low-cost power source by private operators, and implementing a strong, independent regulator of the power sector with clear oversight authority. The last of the structural reforms is infrastructure reform, improving the quality of the infrastructure of Puerto Rico, not only critical to economic growth, but also to the quality of life on the island for the residents of the island. These sets of reforms are meant to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of infrastructure and capital investments critical to improve mobility on the island, which we will discuss towards the end of our agenda today, increase convenience for residents, and lower costs for business. So these structural reforms are the economic growth platform in the fiscal plan, all aimed at increasing the ability of the economy to grow and therefore increasing the resources available to the government in the end for its purposes and use. As mentioned earlier, there are also 7 groups of fiscal measures in the fiscal plan to manage the expenditure side. If the structural reforms were about the revenue side, these are primarily about the expenditure side of the budget, and they ensure fiscal balance. These fiscal measures ensure sustainable, affordable government responsive to the residents' needs. First, there's a group of agency efficiencies. How do we enable better service delivery in a more cost-effective way? How do agency-specific efficiencies help? And how can we target investments, not cuts, but added spending in frontline service delivery? Second, creation of the Office of the CFO. How do we centralize fiscal management through an Office of the CFO responsible for oversight and management of the Treasury, cash and liquidity, budgeting, ensuring compliance with procurement, contract, and human resource policies across all agencies and other fiscal functions to ensure proper management and usage of government funds. The third of the 7 is Medicaid reform. How do we bend the cost trend of healthcare? The costs in Medicaid are growing faster than inflation. How do we do that while simultaneously improving the value of the healthcare that the people of Puerto Rico are receiving under Medicaid? How do we do that? We do that through the reduction of fraud, waste, and abuse, reduction of fraudulent enrollment, and value-based reforms to improve the quality of care relative to cost. It's important to note again, as I did on the agencies, that fiscal measures are not always about savings or reductions in cost. They are also about incremental investments targeted. In the last certified fiscal plan, for example, there were targeted investments of some $600 million in spending in healthcare benefits programs and the healthcare system itself, in part to help combat COVID, but also in part to just improve the healthcare sector as we noticed the needs and the critical aspects during COVID. The next area of fiscal measures is actually aimed at the revenue side, and that's improved tax compliance and fee enhancement. Simply, everyone needs to pay their fair share through new systems, processes, improved collections. The fifth reform is pension reform, one that I know is a very difficult issue for all on the island. These reforms are aimed solely at restoring fiscal balance for a system that was already bankrupted prior to the establishment of the Oversight Board. The retirees are being paid today from current expenditures because there are no funds remaining in the employment retirement system. The retirement reform is aimed at ensuring that never again do retirees face false, unaffordable promises, nor do future governments 10 years from now, 20 years from now, balance their budgets by impairing pensioners again. The sixth reform, reduction of subsidies to the University of Puerto Rico, is simply meant to encourage the university to diversify its revenue stream and become more efficient via a separate set of revenue measures and expenditure measures in its own certified fiscal plan. Again, it is not only reductions in their budget. There are targeted incremental investments that have been made in the certified fiscal plan and budget to establish, for example, a needs-based scholarship for anyone who needs support, financial support on a needs base for paying tuition at the University of Puerto Rico. Also, an independent scholarship program has been established for medical students who will commit to practice in underserved areas of the island. The last fiscal measure is on the reduction of municipal subsidies. This is to encourage the fiscal review of municipality operations, encourage more sound financial management of the municipalities, encourage revenue enhancement via an improved property tax system, service consolidation to reduce costs between and among individual municipalities. And separately, again, other than the reduction of the equalization fund, there are also increased investments into the municipalities. So separately from that reduction in the equalization fund, the certified fiscal plan and budget includes incentives into the consolidation of municipal services of approximately $22 million available each year for the next 5 years to encourage and enhance the ability of consolidating services. So it is both positive and negative in many cases. Again, once the fiscal plan is certified under Section 202 of PROMESA, we then proceed to certify the budget based on that newly updated certified fiscal plan. And as I've mentioned, the revenue forecasts for budgeting purposes have already been provided to the government via letter based on the existing certified fiscal plan. The government is slated to present its proposed budget next week on February 2nd, and we look forward to working with the government and the legislature on this process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move on. You're on mute, David. If you could unmute yourself, please.
I thought I was going to make it through this without messing that up. What I was asking for was whether there were any questions or comments, and I didn't see any. Well, I do now. I see Justin.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Natalie, for your presentation. Put my hand down. I think that was a great overview. And as Natalie said, we're going to be getting into the fiscal plan and the budget. And one of the things that I think is really important, I've been a consistent proponent, obviously, of ending Title III so we can move past all this. But one of the things I think is also really important is getting the numbers right. And I saw earlier in the month, I think it was mid-January, the governor said something about the economic forecasts and wanting to ensure accuracy. And I'm not speaking for him, but I was really pleased to see attention call to that because it's something that I have talked about frequently. I had good meetings last week with the legislative leaders in Puerto Rico, both parties. We talked mostly about economic growth, but we talked about this as well. I think it's a fair topic for hearings in the legislature about how we get the numbers right. In 2018, fiscal year 2018, we forecast, the board, $8.1 billion. A month later, the performance was almost $9.5 billion, well, 9.3. So, we're off by over $1 billion in a month. And that has so many repercussions. It obviously has repercussions for our ability to navigate through Title III, and we've been through that, and then we're in the midst of that now, and hopefully we'll get through it. But I think it also has repercussions for Puerto Rico and its leaders because it gives them less flexibility. There is going back to what my new colleague, Mr. Medina, said. Economic growth is a big focus for the board. It should be, and I'm eager to work on that with him. But I think having the knowledge on what capital we have to invest in Puerto Rico is important too. We're not going to grow Puerto Rico by cutting budgets and just doing deals. We got to do deals to attract investment, but we need to focus on growth too, and we need to focus on investment. So I'd like to ask Mackenzie, if they're on the phone today, what we're doing, what's our plan to make sure we get the numbers right. And, if you could explain, how we could be off by $1 billion in less than a month. I know we had hurricanes that year, but there's something every year. And what we know is that the federal government is always there with more money. And our plans need to reflect that too. When they don't reflect that, again, we're not just impacting our ability to navigate through Title III, but we're negatively impacting Puerto Rico. And we're not giving the governor and the leaders in the legislature the resources they need to invest in education, to invest in the University of Puerto Rico, to invest in the workforce, and to do the things that they need to do. So it can't just all be about cutting budgets. We need to get the numbers right, and we need to grow the economy. So I really would like to hear from Mackenzie today on what Mackenzie is going to do to ensure that we get the numbers right going forward.
Thank you, Justin. Before Mackenzie responds, they're not Mackenzie's forecast. So let me just give an overview. I really appreciate the question, and Mackenzie can follow up as part of the process, but they're not their forecasts. So I think it's really important for us to kind of get on the same place in terms of how the process of forecasting works, who's involved, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify the misunderstandings that are widely held, especially at this time when we're about to begin the process again. So first, let me stress that the methodology and the approach that's been taken by the Oversight Board for the past 4 years is purposefully careful and fiscally conservative. The practice of previous governments consistently included overestimating revenues and overspending, and then incurring deficits that were funded by the debt, which in turn led to unaffordable debt, bankruptcy, PROMESA, and the establishment of this Oversight Board. The mandate of PROMESA requires us to reestablish fiscal accountability, and fiscal conservative budgeting is part of that fiscal accountability. Second, as I mentioned, it's not McKinsey's forecast, and so we need to clear that up. The way that they don't operate in a dark room providing.
Well, what does McKinsey do then, and whose forecast is it? But who was off by $1 billion?
So I'm going to explain, and I'm going to show you the numbers because we weren't off by $1 billion. Just give me a second. So the annual process that we are beginning now involves a wide variety of inputs from the Puerto Rico Planning Board to the Puerto Rico Institute of Statistics, feedback from local Puerto Rican economists with whom we meet regularly, in groups, individually. It includes the local business community and their assumptions, as well as information from our own business surveys, as well as mainland information. Remember that we take into account, for example, the mainland forecast before we even begin to apply trends and differentiation of the Puerto Rico forecast. So one of the questions recently that the board had to determine was whether or not to continue using the CBO, or the Congressional Budget Office, forecast for the mainland, or to use the IMF, International Monetary Fund, forecast for the mainland. Remember, we build our macroeconomic forecast from the mainland and then adjust for Puerto Rico trends. The board took a concrete decision to continue to use the Congressional Budget Office as we are a U.S. government entity, a territorial entity, and the IMF forecasts were much more conservative. But the board made a conscious decision, not McKinsey, not staff, but the board, to continue to use the CBO as a consistent baseline for the mainland forecast. So the factors that drive the macroeconomic forecast are a wide variety, and they're pulled together by all the economists who are advisors and staff. That is, we use economists at McKinsey, economists at Ernst & Young, our own staff advisor, Ricardo Fuentes, as well as Andrew Wolf, who's a former IMF economist. And that group of economists together brings the macroeconomic forecast, the assumptions made, to the Oversight Board for a decision. The board decides on the assumptions taken. The board then decides on how we finalize that macroeconomic forecast. That forecast, after being pulled together by a wide variety of sources and approved by the board, is used to then drive revenue forecast, which is the second part. And so in that revenue forecasting, the process begins, as it already has this year, working together with Hacienda, or the Puerto Rican Department of Treasury, to look at current year revenues, to look at the trends within the revenues, looking at different sectors of the economy, different groups of taxpayers. And those revenue forecasts are then built on a number of assumptions. Those assumptions are recommended by advisors, as I said, Ernst & Young, McKinsey, Andrew Wolf, as well as our staff, our team at the Commonwealth, our team of local economists, before being presented to you, the Oversight Board members, for a line-by-line discussion of the assumptions and the forecasting of every line. And that is the Oversight Board's vote and decision on how to ultimately include those revenue forecasts. If you put up a slide. In terms of the under forecasting, and I've shown this slide before, so it shouldn't be new. I don't often know where people get some of the numbers, but sometimes it has to do with the way the fiscal plan is written. So sometimes people pull numbers from the fiscal plan that reflect pre-measures revenues rather than post-measure revenues. Again, there are multiple measures that are affecting our forecast. There is the pre-measure baseline, and then there are the measures that they need to achieve. And so here you see each of the fiscal plans actual post-measures revenue forecast. So fiscal year 2018, the actual was 9.3. And after the hurricane, we were about $1 billion, a little more than $1 billion under forecasting, because we did the forecast at a period in time when we had not yet gotten any confidence of any federal fiscal stimulus into the system post-hurricane. I explained that we were kind of sitting in the dark when the electricity was off and before the federal government had acted in response. However, when you look over time, I'm almost done, Justin.
Okay, sorry.
When you look over time, the difference is literally on average 1.2% in budgeting. And I am very proud to say that we under budget, again, because over budgeting is the most critical mistake you can make. As a former Minister of Finance managing a country's budget, the worst situation I could ever be in is to have to cut expenses mid-year, cut programs, lay people off, furlough them, because I overestimated my revenues in the first place and have, in Puerto Rico's case, no access to debt to finance that potential deficit. So the under forecasting, on average 1.2 to 2%, is typical for states, and it's appropriate, especially for a jurisdiction that is repeatedly overestimated, overspent, and caused deficits, which again, ultimately caused bankruptcy and caused PROMESA and caused this board to be here. We need to reverse that trend, and we have been successful in doing so.
So if I can, thank you for that. And I understand the point of view of not knowing the federal money is coming. One observation, and then one more question. Observation is when we get the federal money.
Justin, after your observation, John Nixon wanted to say something. So
well, I'm still asking my question. Okay. I let Natalie go on, and excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I let Natalie go on, and I'm going to finish answering my question. Thank you.
You can do that, and then we'll let John get in, and then you can ask your next question.
Great. I think that when we have forecasts that are off and reality shows a different set of numbers, we should be updating the fiscal plan. Again, when we're not doing that, there's less money for the Commonwealth to work with and doing what they need to do. and there's less resources in the way for us to navigate Title III. My other question is, and I just want to know because, I talk with some of FOMB's advisors and they don't know what McKinsey does. And they say, we don't know if it's McKinsey, it's Ernst & Young, it's Andrew Wolf. So what does McKinsey do and how much do we pay them? And who really is responsible for the numbers? Can we get an answer on that in a transparent way? Sure.
First, with regard to less money and updating, we update annually the fiscal plan specifically for that purpose. The fact of the matter is we are right now in a pre-debt service, as you know, situation, and we are managing not with the full amount of revenues, but with the revenues allowed for budget purposes, which is very different. We are managing purposefully to a surplus to enable restoring the debt service and ending the Title III. In terms of what McKinsey does, it's changed over time. Their contracts are all public and on our website. So the amount of money that we spend, their scopes of work in every case. But basically, they are one of the advisors that help the staff under my leadership to pull together a fiscal plan. That fiscal plan has inputs from my education team on the education section, the Commonwealth team on the Commonwealth. We have an implementation department within our staff that discusses implementation and timing. McKinsey provides advice. They provide frameworks, they provide benchmarking, and I can ask if McKinsey wants to add anything. But again, I need to say they are one of a team of advisors that works together under the board, under the staff's direction, to bring the board a proposed fiscal plan, proposed assumptions, things for you to determine whether you wish to include or exclude at any given time.
How much have they been paid over the last 4 years?
Let me let John Nixon come in. Justin, we will respond to every question. I just want to have an orderly process of questions. I think John Nixon wanted to make a question or comment, and then the governor wanted to make a question or comment, and we'll come back.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and Justin, I certainly appreciate your question as far as the forecast. I've been involved with government forecasts now for 20 years, and being within 1 or 2% is pretty remarkable. I mean, with all the moving parts, especially right now with COVID, the federal money, all the different variables that are coming in, it's a very difficult thing to do. But one of the things that I would suggest is this is the board's decision, right? How aggressive we want to be on our forecast is up to the board. It's not up to McKinsey. It's not up to the staff. I mean, this is a discussion that I would suggest that we discuss as a board. We can certainly have a strategy discussion on how the estimates are done, all the variables that go into them, all of the driving indicators or leading indicators. And we can give the staff direction on where we want to see and how we want to see it. But in dealing 20 years with revenue forecasters, first of all, it's more of an art than a science because nobody really knows exactly what's going to happen over the next 12 months in the economy and with everything else that's going on. But as far as being aggressive, I think, or conservative, that's a discussion we need to have as a 7-member board. As far as some of these questions go, I would suggest that we, have a follow-up discussion and not chew up all the time in the board meeting to have these discussions because it's very complex. You're never going to be right on with a revenue projection. I've never seen a revenue projection that's come right on, especially in a turbulent time like this. So I would just suggest that and I'd be happy to have a follow-up discussion with you about this and my experience with projections. But I would suggest that we as a board discuss this, determine what risk we're willing to accept as a board with the revenue projections. Again, keep in mind, as Natalie said, the revenue projections get you into trouble if you're not careful. And if you appropriate a budget based upon faulty revenue projections, it's a lot easier to add money than it is to cut money back. But these are not Natalie's decisions. They're not the staff's decisions. It's not McKinsey's decisions. This is up to the board on how aggressive we want to be.
Right. Well,
and we ought to have that discussion.
I get that. I respect that. I actually think that the public and most specifically the people of Puerto Rico deserve to know how the money is being spent and who is making the decisions. I've been on the board 5 months and I wasn't part part of any of these decisions. And I know we're about ready to get into that process. So what I'd like to do is instill and try to build in some accountability into the next round. It does matter. People get hurt when the board is wrong. And I'm not putting that on any one person. I want to make progress. So people get hurt, and it hurts the educational system. It hurts the ability of Puerto Rico's duly elected leaders, whom we are not, to make decisions about resources that affect 3.5 million Americans. So that's why I'm concerned about this. I actually think having the discussion in the public is entirely appropriate, and that the public and the people of Puerto Rico deserve to know all these things.
Well, I think that's a fair assumption. I'm not suggesting at all that we keep anything from the public, quite the contrary. But what I'm saying is there's a baseline of understanding that I think all the board members need to be brought up to speed on. I, for one, understand revenue projections. I've been part of billions and billions of dollars of revenue projections, as maybe you have. Maybe some of the other board members aren't as familiar with how they come. And what I would suggest is a briefing session. If you want to debate it out in the public, we can certainly do that. As far as transparency, that's probably a separate issue, right, of who we're paying and how we're paying. That's kind of a separate issue. But I would suggest that maybe we all get a baseline understanding of how these projections are made and so on and so forth. And then we can go to the next step.
I'll just reiterate what John said earlier. These are board decisions. These are decisions that we make through the fiscal plan process. The board made all of the decisions that went into the current fiscal plan as a board, and we will continue to do that. I have the governor, and then Antonio, and then Betty all have questions or comments. Governor?
Yes. I'll be brief. Regarding the expenses, as I see it, the best way to reduce the board's expenses is to expedite the debt restructuring process, make sure that the board submits a plan of adjustment to the court that is affordable from the point of view of the government of Puerto Rico's finances, and then the judge does her part. It's taken too long. Once that's done, then the clock starts ticking, because then we can really put the fiscal house in order, because we'll know the amount of debt service that Puerto Rico will be paying for the next 20 years or so. And we're now, that's not certain now. So that's why the board needs to act with a sense of urgency in putting this issue before the court. Now, apart from that, I'll say that the fact of, in terms of the fiscal plan, it was always intended since Promesa was being discussed and considered and approved in Congress, that the fiscal plan would be a living document, that it would be revised periodically depending on multiple factors, including economic factors. I know that in the past, the board revised the fiscal plan mid-year as needed. What I notice now is that the board hasn't revised the fiscal plan since May of last year, when it certified the current version. And since then, there have been two different CBO forecasts or updates by CBO, which haven't been taken into account, at least haven't resulted in any revision of the fiscal plan. At the same time, the government, we're in the middle of the pandemic, and Puerto Rico has been receiving a substantial amount of federal funds that also were not envisioned when the current version of the fiscal plan was designed and approved or certified by the board. Lastly, our Treasury Department has been obtaining tax collections that exceed the ones forecast in the current fiscal plan. And this is a matter of public record. I'm not saying anything that is not public, because our Secretary of the Treasury every now and then reports publicly what Hacienda is collecting, and there's more transparency anyway, because of the board's requirements, I should say. And now anybody who wants to know about Puerto Rico's finances, including its collections, it amounts deposited in bank accounts and so on, has that information real time. So all that I'll say is that this is the past. It sounds like a complaint, but it's not really. I'm just alerting the board that because we don't have a revised fiscal plan and we have to live with the current baseline, it limits the government's flexibility to put forth a proposed budget that is real and that ensures that we have a working government. So next Tuesday, you'll see that I'll have to present a budget that may not be totally consistent with the fiscal plan, but it's for obvious reasons. Because as I see it, the government needs a bit more flexibility. It could have had it if the fiscal plan had been revised. So we'll see where this course takes us. But those are my comments at this point in the hearing.
Thank you, Governor. And as you well know, we are about to enter into this process in earnest, and so we will have much opportunity to talk about all of these issues. Natalie, did you want to add anything or no?
No, thank you.
Okay. Antonio had a question in that or comment.
Yes.
Then Betty.
Thank you very much, David. Really, as this is my first meeting and it's the first time that I see this process from the inside as a board member, I'll frame my comment more as a request. I would like to get a deep dive in this process and truly understand what are the drivers, both on the revenue and the expense side on this plan, and try to understand what are the key assumptions that we need to look at and align a little bit with Justin's comment to understand what has changed. More importantly, I wonder, and I don't know, perhaps Natalie can clear up for me, do we have a long-term GDP growth plan that has specific milestones that ensure that over the next 2, 5, 10 years, we understand where our GDP growth is going to be coming from. I believe that, as I mentioned, we have amazing capital coming into the market, and there's some great upside opportunities that have a lot of risk, especially those that require legislation or court decisions. However, I think in my years as a CFO, I was not only looking at next year's plan in terms of the actual expenses and revenues, but I was also looking at what was my strategic objective, where I was going, where did the growth come from, and what were those critical issues that might bring down the revenues that I was forecasting. So again, I'm making it almost as a request. I would like to have, as part of the onboarding process, and maybe it's not just for me, maybe it's for everybody in the group, or at least for the new members of the board, a deep dive on these matters where we can have the opportunity to drill into some of these critical assumptions and understand what has happened, what has changed, and where are we going.
Yes, if I may, Chairman?
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Medina, all of that is part of your onboarding, and as you begin your onboarding, as the new members did, we do that first for the Commonwealth with you, which should be next week, and then we do that for every one of the instrumentalities. So it is part of hours and hours of onboarding that you have ahead of you, so no incremental requests needed, as well as it being part of the fiscal plan process that you will go through as we adopt a new fiscal plan by April 23rd. So it is all part of the normal routine of working with the board.
Excellent.
And
thank you
just
very much.
to answer the question, to answer the question about long-term, the fiscal plan is a 30-year plan. It has 30-year GNP, not GDP, but GNP forecasts. And those structural reforms that I went through with you are the core of the growth forecasts and the projections, and includes those reforms actually happening to project those, to make those projections. I also wanted to take a moment before, Betty, you speak, to answer a question, I think, from Justin, that I didn't have the data in front of me. So I believe that I reported previously, and it's on our website, the Title III fees to date, the court that the court has approved that I'm aware of. The last recording I had brings McKinsey's total fees, and this is all public information, to somewhere in the range of $72 million. And then I believe that in total, with the incremental fees at the board that are not in the Title III court, the total is approximately $130 million. Again, all of that is available to the public on our website. All of the contracts, all of the payments, all of our financial statements audited, as well as those Title III fees, not only from our advisors, but the government's advisors and the Committee of Retirees advisors and the Unsecured Creditors Committee advisors. All of the fees in the Title III court were part of a presentation at a previous board meeting and are public, available. And all of our contracts with every organization that advises us, including McKinsey, but not only, all available publicly for your review on our website.
Thanks, Natalie. And Betty had a question or comment.
Sure, just a comment. I think I just want to say all of our time, our time is very precious and valuable. And I think one of the things that I'm concerned about is that we usually, we have, as most boards, you have an agenda and usually you try to focus and stay. So, Mr. Chairman, I would say that there are, just like Mr. Medina talked, as soon as he started to talk about the deep dive, I thought of our onboarding process. So that was helpful to acknowledge that. But I do think some of these questions can be handled in, some of them, and I understand in terms of public, but it's very challenging and difficult to get through an agenda when there are things that are raised. That I do think that there are different forums that those things can be raised and handled. So if we can, if I can submit that we stay on our agenda and we stay focused. I also know that sometimes we can raise an issue that takes us off track, and it's important. But I do think that we should stay focused on our agenda and have other mechanisms to address some of the issues that we passionately care about.
I'd be fine with that as long as they're public and as long as we can do it in front of everybody and not just go behind closed doors and pay all of this money to firms without asking.
Justin, I was never suggesting that we do not have these in public. I do think, to Natalie's point, some of these things are in public space already, and I think it behooves us to ensure that we are judicious about our time, and that when they are in public, that we also are responsible to know that we are each other's keepers in terms of the agenda, and that we do our due diligence in making sure when I'm concerned about a question, I will direct it to the staff, make sure, and it doesn't mean that I don't bring it into public space, but I do have a responsibility prior to bringing it into public space. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. It does seem to me that it is possible both to be fully transparent and to draw lines between what you do at different kinds of meetings, what takes place at a public meeting, and what you do when the board is making decisions, particularly with something as complicated as the fiscal plan, which is an enormously complicated process. And speaking for myself personally, I think it is remarkable that we have been as close to on target with the forecasts as we have been, given the incredible complexity of the past four years and everything that's happened.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Betty. Why don't we turn to the next agenda item, which is contract review under Section 204B of PROMESA. And I believe that our senior counsel, Camelia Mantilla, is going to be presenting that item. Are you there, Camelia?
Good morning.
Thank you.
Yes. Consistent with the Oversight Board's contract review policy established under PROMESA, the Central Recovery and Reconstruction Office of Puerto Rico, or CORE 3, has submitted a third change order to its contract with ICF Incorporated for approval. Because the total value of the contract and subsequent modifications exceeds $100 million, this change order requires board vote for approval. Please go to the next slide. In June 2018, CORE 3 executed a contract with ICF Incorporated, or ICF, for disaster recovery grant claims review services and disaster recovery project formulation services after hurricanes Irma and Maria. Consistent with the Oversight Board's contract review policy established under PROMESA, this contract was originally reviewed and approved by FOMB as it is compliant with the fiscal plan, which requires CORE 3 to apply the best practices to improve efficiency and transparency to all areas of infrastructure expenditure of the Commonwealth. Furthermore, it is fully federally funded. Subsequent to the original contract, 3 amendments and 2 change orders have been executed related to this agreement. CORE 3 recently submitted a third change order to the contract for the Oversight Board's review. The change order under consideration would decrease both the scope of work and the dollar value of ICF's contract with CORE 3 by approximately $29 million. However, total authorized payments for the contract and subsequent amendments to ICF still exceed $100 million, requiring board vote for approval of the proposed change order. After review, board staff recommend approving this change order due to its fiscal plan compliance. Please go to the next slide. Thank you. The change order submitted for approval, change order 3, specifically eliminates the project formulation scope of ICF's contract for the current term, which covers the period from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. As discussed, this change order proposes to eliminate all tasks and deliverables related to project formulation services from the contract. The change order states that ICF shall not provide further project formulation services under this amendment, and that CORE 3 shall not be responsible for compensating ICF in the event that ICF renders any project formulation services from the date of the execution of this amendment. Change Order 3 proposes to decrease the value of the contract by approximately $29 million. Next slide, please. ICF will continue to provide grants management services under the current contract through June 30th, 2021. The proposed change order would reduce ICF's contract by approximately $29.2 million for the period covering from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. In accordance with the information presented, board staff recommends approving this change order.
Thank you, Camelia. Are there any questions or comments on this requested change to the contract?
Dr. Rosa, you have your hand up. You might want to put it down if you don't have another comment.
Thank you, I will.
I don't see or hear any questions, so can I have a motion to approve this contract for Core 3 and ICF?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, John. Can I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Andrew. As usual, I'll ask for a voice vote. Let's start with those in favor. Please say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Yes, David, again, I just don't feel I have the wherewithal to have an informed opinion. So until I go through the onboarding process and I understand better these issues, I rather just remain as an abstention.
Thank you, Antonio. And I am confident that a month from now, you're not likely to be abstaining. I will not guarantee anything. Who knows what the issues will be, but we'll be on a.
Well, I can assure you, I have plenty of opinions and a lot of interest in making things change.
So we will not be expecting.
So today will not be the norm more it will be the exception.
Yeah, that's the way to put it. We all may abstain from time to time, but that will not be the norm, as it is not the norm for any of us. So that motion is approved. Our fifth item of business is Section 204C, reapportionments and reprogrammings. This is a series of recommendations on reapportionment requests from the government of Puerto Rico. And I believe that Janorly Maldonado is going to be presenting these. Janorly, are you there?
Yes. Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Skeel. We now present for the Oversight Board's action, a series of recommendations on reapportionments requests from the government of Puerto Rico, attached here to as Exhibit 1. I would like to highlight the following reapportionments. First, request number 5, the Office of the Woman Advocate is requesting $654,000 to implement the Executive Order 2020-078 that deals with the violence against women. The funds will be used to hire 13 employees for the prevention and education campaigns, computer equipment, and professional services. The proposed source of funds are savings that were identified within the Public Housing Administration, which the agency has confirmed to have available. The recommendation is to approve this interagency transfer as sufficient documentation was provided. Here on this page, request number 12, the Department of Education is requesting a $9 million reapportionment to reallocate funds within the OPEX category of spend into professional services. The funds will be used to provide therapies and related services for special education students. The recommendation is to approve the request. Can you go to the next page? Request number 22, the Department of Consumer Affairs is requesting $13,000 to purchase materials and equipment to maintain social distancing in their regional office. Consistent with prior recommendations, the government must use CARES funds to cover expenditures related to COVID. Thus, the recommendation is to deny the request as CARES monies are available and can be used for this purpose. Request number 25, the Convention Center is requesting an interagency transfer of $2 million to pay for the insurance costs. Due to the pandemic, the Convention Center has not generated sufficient revenue to cover its operations. The government identified a surplus within the Public Housing Authority's budget and is proposing a transfer to the Convention Center to cover the shortfall. As such, our recommendation is to approve this request. Request number 26, the Retirement Board is asking for a budget increase of $1.6 million from prior year collections to cover financial statement audit services for fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20. The source of funds that was provided is restricted, thus the agency must submit a valid source of funds within the FY21 budget for us to approve the request. The recommendation is to deny until another source of funds is identified. Next page, please. Request number 32, the Bureau of Forensic Sciences is requesting a fund release from prior year surpluses in the amount of $1.7 million to fund ongoing capital expenditures. These balances pertain to prior year appropriations that were given to the Institute when the Bureau was an independent agency. The recommendation is to approve the fund release condition on the remittance of any remaining balances to the TSA. Request number 37, the Tourism Corporation program under the Department of Economic Development and Commerce is requesting access to $10 million of prior year cash to pay the DMO, the convention center, and to fund part of tourism's operations, given room tax collections declines have prevented the agency to comply with these transfers. As provided under Section 4 of the SRF Certified Budget Resolution, the Puerto Rico Tourism Company can access unused collections during prior fiscal years to fund current operations if necessary. As such, the recommendation is to approve this request. And lastly, request number 38, the UPR Comprehensive Cancer Center has requested an interagency transfer of $28 million to cover operational expenditures associated with their research and hospital operations. This request is to fund current operations and incremental funding for additional payroll, professional fees, and equipment. Based on our review, the recommendation is a partial interagency approval of $10 million for the Cancer Center to continue its operations within this fiscal year 2021 and have incremental funding be reviewed during the FY22 budget process. This concludes my presentation unless there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Janorli. And I'll ask for questions and comments. And I see that I have one to start with, and that is from the governor.
Yes, Janorli, and actually board members. The one that you mentioned involving the retirement board of the government of Puerto Rico strikes my attention because it deals with the financial statements that are apparently, based on what I'm reading here, it deals with the process of getting audited financial statements out there. And I, as well as the board, I very much want the government to expedite everything it's doing to get those financial statements in order and published. So it just, I wonder, and then you mentioned that apparently the board believes or the staff believes that they should identify some other source for this funding. Well, all that I'm saying with respect to this one is, you know, if it's another source within the agency, let's you know, do whatever we can do so that it does that, and as quickly as possible. And if they need technical support, let's provide it. If it is a source of funding from another agency, the same applies. I mean, this is a topic that is so important that we shouldn't be delaying on it. And if the government has been delaying, then we should be helping the government to expedite. The second comment that I have is one that you didn't mention, but it caught my attention. Apparently, based on the schedule I have, item 35 shows the board denying a request from the Puerto Rico Ports Authority for allowing an interagency transfer so that the government of Puerto Rico can pretty much provide the matching the non-federal share of two projects mentioned there, the reconstruction of the Aguadilla Airport runway and the Bahia de San Juan dredging. Well, let me tell the board, in case the board doesn't know. I mean, those are very strategic projects, particularly the Aguadilla Airport runway. There you're talking about a $135 million investment, most of it from the federal government, to have basically a new airstrip in Aguadilla. That has all kinds of multiple effects or multiplier effects, because you're talking about a strategic asset of the government of Puerto Rico for purposes of both tourism and cargo. And it is a strategic project that I have in my own government plan. And if for some reason what's happening is that you envisioned, I don't know, maybe you envisioned, maybe they can use CDBG-DR funding for that, but that's not a good answer. The funding is needed now. The federal government, FAA, is insisting that we provide the match now because they don't trust the government of Puerto Rico because of its fiscal mess. So it's not like something I can wait till the next fiscal year to deal with, and we have to act again with a sense of urgency. So what I am saying here is let's keep an eye. Lastly, when we're talking about big ticket items, let's make sure that we act with a sense of urgency, that we're not simply requiring more information or saying, you know, guys, go and find some other source. No, we need to just push the ball. Now, lastly, I saw some items here that are really non-material. And I know the language of PROMESA. And I know PROMESA requires that the board bless any kind of reprogramming. But there has to be some kind of internal process at the board, provided for pretty much not automatic review and approval, but something close to it. For items involving $2,000, $4,000, let's not occupy the board's time, even worse, board's consultants' time on items like those. It should be a matter pretty much of course. So that's what I'll say.
Thank you, Governor. And Chair, I'll try to respond generally. Help me out here. So first of all, Governor, we totally agree it should be the most efficient process, the easiest process possible. But the law doesn't provide authority to advisors or to me to make any of these reprogrammings. It has to all go to the board. And so we do it as quickly as we can. And as you noticed today, we didn't belabor many of the items. We only did a select look at a handful of them in order to expedite the process. But the law specifically says the board has to approve all reprogrammings. So we don't have the flexibility within the law to do otherwise. We continue to work with your staff to make this process as minimally invasive as possible and as quick as possible. But sometimes it has to do with, again, financial management and the lack of a real office of the CFO, lack of a single accounting system. It's hard for different parts of government to speak to one another. On the first one, with regard to the employment retirement system and the costs meant for audit, we definitely want you to find as quickly as possible another source for those. But the cash in those ERS accounts that is being proposed has already been dedicated in the proposal for debt that's been made public to the creditor negotiations. I can't use the cash in two places, and that cash is already part of the publicly stated offer that the board has made to the creditors. So that's the reason we can't approve that use of money. Any other source from not those accounts, but from other accounts in the government, other unused sources. But as you know, there is in the public offer that the board has made an amount of cash, and certain accounts have been used to come up with that cash, and we can't use that cash twice. On the second one, which is absolutely critical, and we have no disagreement with the economic development priorities that you named or that are part of that, it's simply that taking money from the federal cost share account, which is meant for specifically the cost share for the FEMA monies, if you take it for that, which is not a part of the FEMA cost share, we may end up not having enough to do the FEMA investments. So we're working closely with Core 3. We expect to have an answer from Core 3 as to what the expectations are for the need for cost share. That account was set up specifically to enable you to do the FEMA investments that you need to do this year. And if it's not needed, then they tell us it's not needed, then you can use it for something else. But that amount was intended for and meant for you to be able to do your 10% cost share on all your FEMA investment in this fiscal year.
Thank you, Natalie. Janarli, did you want to add anything to that?
No, Mr. Chair. Natalie covered everything.
Okay. And I have,
Chairman, if I may, very quickly, if the FEMA, might not be the right language, but if the reserve that exists for FEMA-related projects, if that cannot be used for this, which is an FAA project, then immediately identify where the government should be getting the funds from or assist the government in doing it, because this is a strategic project that is too important. We have the transshipment waiver right now for the cabotage laws, for the Jones Act requirements. True, airports we have closed the Aguadilla airport for purposes of commercial travel, tourism and so on, and regular scheduled travel, as well as Ponce, but we need that airport. And we will be opening that airport soon. So all I'm asking, and I'll leave it at this, is that there are items and there are items. There are some of this reprogramming requests that are critical. And it's not a matter of, okay, well, you didn't identify this or that. Engage the government, raise it, help the government. That's your role. It's not simply to say yes or no. You have all this staff, you have all these consultants, engage. So that
I assure you, Governor, we are engaged, and we are doing that with your team all the time, 24/7.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Governor. We have questions or comments from Antonio and Justin. So, Antonio.
Thank you. Governor, I fully agree with you. I think your examples underscore the need to have Title V fully operational, and it is not. There's no list of strategic projects for Puerto Rico. There's not a person fully responsible for the revitalization of our economy. So I think that we need to work together to ensure that we bring that chapter to life, and that we bring the real priorities of Puerto Rico front and center, such that we can get them done, we can get the permits in an expedited manner, and we can drive economic growth together through a PROMESA.
Thank you, Antonio. Justin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By the way, I apologize for interrupting you earlier. I wanted to just finish my point, got a little passionate.
And I apologize for interrupting me. Well, maybe take breaths when we talk.
All good. I also agree with the governor, and I think economic development is really important. This is something that if I had the input of FOMB or the governor on, I might have spoken up when it was first presented to us. Believe it or not, I've actually been talking to the FAA recently, the director of airports, on another project I'm doing in my hometown in Nebraska, just pro bono. And he noted that I was on the board, and he said, hey, we're doing some things in Puerto Rico wanting to improve their airports. It's really important. We'd love to talk to you about that. So I just want to underscore the importance of this and the importance that the FAA puts on it. I've recently spoken to the director of airport improvements, not anticipating that the conversation would turn to Puerto Rico. So I'd like to put a motion on the floor that we modify this reprogramming request to approve rather than deny. And I hope there's a second, because the board should be about growth, and we can't grow the economy of Puerto Rico by just cutting all the time. So I move that we approve this line 35, page 8, change from deny to approve. If there's a second, that'd be great. I'd love to have a vote on this before we vote on the package.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor to amend to change one of the recommendations. Is there a second to the motion? I don't hear a second, so that motion will die. These are issues, obviously, that we can continue to talk about. Just to comment on a more of a 30,000 foot level, rather than on the specific items here. Reprogramming is really important. And I think that's why PROMESA requires that the Oversight Board approve reprogramming requests. It's, in my view, essential to fiscal responsibility and to correcting some of the problems in the budgeting in Puerto Rico in the past. I know it is very frustrating for the government to have to put all these requests before us, but it is essential, and we have made a real effort throughout to be as accommodating as possible when the money is there for whatever the request is, and I'm confident we will continue to do so, and we appreciate the urgency of particular items that are urgent items. Any other questions, comments on this? Do I have a motion for the approval of the recommendations?
Yeah. Chairman.
Yes.
Chairman. This is, and again, I'm going to try to be very brief. All that I want happening here, this is a new administration. All I want happening is to change the relationship between the board staff, consultants, and the government. This shouldn't be a clash. This shouldn't be culture. You didn't request it the right way. You have to, no. It should be a conversation, a collaboration. We should be acting as a team when we're talking about, important matters. Some of these are just petty. And I know, and perhaps it's just because the board has been very granular, including in dealing with minor agencies and instrumentalities, because I don't mind the granularity in the budgeting process for the significant, important players of the government of Puerto Rico. In fact, I think it benefits, the government benefits, the people benefits. But all that I'm asking, and it's good that staff is present here at this hearing, is simply a change of course. I don't want this to be confrontational. And my marching orders to all of the government people interacting with the board is that I don't want this to be confrontational. There will be times when we disagree at the top level. I'm talking at my level. But at the staff level, it shouldn't be. It should simply be just, if you have the right answer, give it, and then tell them, if you simply do this, we'll approve it. So that it flows. And so that particularly in big ticket items, important items, we don't have any delay. That's all. That's my ask. And I'm asking in good faith, in real good faith.
Thank you, Governor. I completely agree that we should have as little friction as possible, and that our staff should interact with your staff as collegially and as quickly and with the same vision, the same ultimate vision as possible. We're not going to always agree. I'm quite confident, but most of the time I think we will. And I certainly will do what I can to make sure that we do have that collegial interaction and responsiveness on our side that you've promised on yours. Justin?
Thank you. I just want to say that I want to explain why I'm going to vote against the reprogramming package. I know it'll pass, so I'm not going to prevent it from passing. And I know there's other things in there that are important, but I I just can't let it go by without pointing out that the board just refused a request from the governor to improve an airport. And it makes me wonder what I'm doing here. I'm here to make the island better. I'm here to do whatever I can to help grow the economy. I know this is just one item, but especially when there's federal funds, I just really am disappointed, and I personally just don't like the optics, and I'm disappointed that it's going to go down that the board again is refusing to allow reprogramming of funds to improve an airport that would have significant impact for economic growth. And I don't want anybody to feel bad or attacked. To me, this is what we're here to do. We're not just here to cut budgets. And so I'm disappointed and kind of sad about this, but that's why I'm going to vote against the reprogramming package. I just wanted to point it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
Sure.
So I want everyone to be clear. We are not voting against investing in the airport. That is not what's happening here. What's happening is a budgetary fiscal responsibility to identify an actual source to use. And as soon as another source is either certified by Core 3 that it's not necessary for FEMA, or that there's an alternative, we will agree. We never go into the issue of whether or not the funds should go to the airport. We're supportive. But there has to be an actual source, because that is our oversight role under law. The source that was identified by the government is necessary for FEMA until and unless the Core 3 tells us they don't need it for FEMA. And when that happens, we move on. So this is not about, I want to be very clear, not providing funds to the airport development in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you, Natalie. I think Andrew has a question or a comment.
Well, I was going to make much the same point that Natalie just made, in the sense that I was going to argue we should, along with the government, come back and take a look at this. But and I agree this is an important project. If you have an important project, you figure out where the money comes from. Part of the process of having the oversight board isn't just so we can go spend money. It's we spend money and we budget in a disciplined fashion, because the lack of that discipline is one of the factors that led Puerto Rico to be where it is today, and thus have to deal with us. So I don't think that we should just be dismissing things for no reason. But at the same time, we shouldn't be approving budgetary items until we have some idea where the money is going to come from. We should work with the government on that. But that's also the government's responsibility. It's not simply for the board to say, here's what you need to do. It's also for the government to say, okay, here's how we want to finance this. We should work together on that. I think we can do this. But I think just to stick this to the board to create a headline that we don't want to improve the airport is not accurate. We have a process for doing this, and I know for the governor, if it seems we're being sticklers on this, it's because we've had a 4-year-long experience where often the process isn't followed, and the board has to go and follow back up with the government, and it leads to this difficult situation. So I think from my view, we're not trying to be difficult. We're not trying to disapprove a project, but let's figure out where the money is going to come from and get it done.
Thank you, Andrew. Betty?
Sure. To follow up on Andrew's point, and something that I heard, and I think this may be helpful to all of us, I'm going to use the example that was used of not denying a particular project, but saying that it's denied, but it can be, it can proceed under COVID dollars. So that to me was critical, because what it said was that better use to support that particular project, because it can be paid under COVID, versus paying it under dollars that may not be appropriate. So it's also leveraging appropriate dollars to support a particular project. And I heard that, and that was helpful. It wasn't just it's denied. It's denied with an explanation that other dollars, as somebody who does budget all the time for my state, in terms of my department, it's so important sometimes to reflect on, are there other dollars that can be used to support a particular project? And that's what I heard on one of them. So, so two quick things. One is, I don't think that one project should impact on voting. There's some really good projects within the context of approval here. And second, I just want to remind all of us that on a personal level, by hearing that there's a way to look at funding, it feels like the staff is working with the governor's staff to find solutions and perhaps as thought partners to find better ways to maximize the dollars. That is what I heard. And so perhaps maybe, zooming in on other ways of paying for projects and efficiencies, because we did talk about structures and efficiencies. And so that to me was a message of efficiencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. I can't resist saying as a lawyer that what we lawyers say, I think about what you're saying, which is we're not saying no to this isn't a permanent no. It's just, it is a temporary no in a way. What we say is it's being denied without prejudice is the legal term of art, without prejudice, which means it can be immediately resubmitted with the appropriate money attached to it. And we're very hopeful, or at least I am very hopeful, that's exactly what will happen. Any other comments or questions? Will somebody make a motion to approve these reprogramming requests?
I will.
Thank you, Betty. A second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Andrew. Per usual, I'll ask for a voice vote, starting with all in favor. Please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining?
David asked before. I was saying, however, in this particular case, I do have a very strong opinion that the governor and his team should work with us and resubmit the project as quickly as possible. We do need these improvements to be done at the airport. So while I stay away from the vote on specific matters that I have not been briefed on, I encourage the governor to come back to us and work together to find a solution to this critical matter for the airport.
Thank you, Antonio. That's helpful. So I believe I'll let Jaime do the official count, but I believe we had 4 yes votes, 2 abstentions, and therefore the motion passes. So let's move to the 6th item on our agenda, which is a Section 205 recommendation letter relating to the transportation sector. I believe Alejandro Figueroa, who is our infrastructure director, will be presenting this. Are you here, Alejandro? If you are, you may be on mute.
I apologize.
Thanks, Alejandro. I think you're back on mute, although I can't hear you, although it doesn't show that you're on mute.
How about now?
That is better.
Okay. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Good morning, board members, or I should say good afternoon, and Governor Pierluisi and Executive Director Jaresco. Today, we would like to go over a proposal for a recommendation under Section 205 of PROMESA for the reorganization of Puerto Rico's transportation sector. If you could go to the next slide, please. Puerto Rico's transportation sector underperforms peer states and systems in terms of safety, with about 140 more fatalities per year due to traffic accidents than the U.S. average. In terms of road quality and condition, with 35% of Puerto Rico's roads being in poor condition compared to 2% in the U.S., 2% being the U.S. median, and financial solvency with, for example, the Tren Urbano recovering only 9% of its cost through its fares compared to the U.S. average of 35%. The island's residents also suffer the consequences of an underperforming system. Residents of San Juan's metropolitan area spend 58 hours per year in traffic compared to 54 hours in some of the largest cities in the United States. Transit assets, such as buses, trains, and ferries, experience 7 times more breakdowns than the U.S. median and are generally inaccessible, with only 7% of San Juan's metropolitan area residents being within walking distance of a mass transit terminal or station. Finally, but not less important, lack of access to integrated mass transit systems results in increased traffic congestion and increased CO2 and other harmful emissions. Next slide, please. Enhancing the island's transportation system, particularly its roads and bridges, is essential also for enabling other key economic growth initiatives, such as some of the ones that we have just discussed. And particularly in this case, efforts to increase air cargo transshipment operations on the island and reshoring pharmaceutical manufacturing operations. The map in the screen shows Puerto Rico's highway and primary road systems, which we have color-coded to reflect road conditions, with, for example, segments in red representing roads in poor condition, and those in yellow representing fair or average conditions. Also on this map, points A through D are areas with heavy manufacturing concentration. And finally, we have also highlighted the various sea and airports that support manufacturing operations across the island. And in this case, you can see the Aguadilla Airport on the northwest, the Ponce Airport and seaports on the south, and then the San Juan airports on the metropolitan area. Life sciences and pharmaceutical products account for 90% of total air cargo in Puerto Rico, while companies that represent 57% of GDP rely heavily on air cargo to transport their products. The recent air cargo waiver awarded by the Department of Transportation helps support up to $1.1 billion in economic activity. The ability to move cargo between each of these points efficiently and effectively is a fundamental consideration companies make when determining whether to do business in Puerto Rico. As you can see from this map, many of the roads and highways interconnecting key manufacturing corridors with cargo ports are in poor or average condition. That represents a key obstacle to the successful implementation of these key economic growth initiatives. Ensuring good quality, well-maintained roads and highways is essential for supporting efforts to increase air cargo and manufacturing and increase overall economic productivity. To address these chronic underperformances and allow Puerto Rico to realize its full potential, we are proposing a set of 6 recommendations aimed at solving 3 key challenges. The first core challenge is overlapping and fragmented structure of the system. The current structure includes multiple entities with responsibilities that overlap across different asset classes. So, for example, the Highways and Transportation Authority, or HTA, is responsible not only for tolled roads, but also for non-tolled roads and for transit assets, particularly the Tren Urbano and the feeder buses that attach to Tren Urbano, which are under HTA. HTA's responsibilities overlap with those of DTOP, which is also responsible for non-tolled roads, and PRITA, the Integrated Transportation Authority, which is also responsible for mass transit, including the Tren Urbano. This overlap creates responsibility vacuums with no clear lines of authority, which leads to projects not getting implemented or being significantly delayed. To address this, we propose first a reorganization of the transportation sector among asset classes so that each entity is assigned a clear responsibilities for similar types of assets. Mainly, this entails that HTA would become a pure toll authority, responsible solely for tolled roads. PRITA will continue to exercise and will enhance its authority over mass transit assets. And finally, the Department of Transportation, or DTOP, retains responsibility mostly for non-toll roads. The second recommendation for addressing these challenges is to create an overarching policy board which purpose is to ensure a holistic approach to long-term transportation planning and to ensure accountability and transparency along the planning and execution phases of all investments needed to maintain and improve transportation systems. The second core challenge we have identified relates to the poor management and coordination within and among these agencies. So this reorganization is not just about moving responsibilities and assets from one entity to another, but also about improving the way these assets are managed. To tackle this issue, we propose the development of a uniform, data-driven, objective project selection framework, such that the investments are based on their impact on the quality of the system. Next, we also propose maximizing private sector partnership and opportunities through, for example, better integration of the Públicos system, which are essentially small private bus operators, and also through through better integration of ride-sharing networks like Uber, Lyft, and others, such that they become an add-on to the transportation system instead of a competitor, as well as use the P3s, public-private partnerships, and other mechanisms to inject private investments into the maintenance and improvement of roads and bridges. Finally, the enhancement of governance structures to increase the level of professional and technical knowledge at the governing board and management levels of these organizations. The last core challenge we have identified is the historical inability for these entities to make full use of all funding opportunities, both federal and non-federal, to finance their projects and operations. To tackle this, we are recommending the government pursue a unified approach across all transportation agencies for maximizing the procurement of funding sources, which we believe has the opportunity to inject an additional $1.5 billion in additional investments over the next 30 years. Next slide, please. And perhaps the question on many of your minds is, why now? Why should the government pursue this endeavor given everything that is going on? Well, as we previously mentioned, an enhanced transportation system supports the successful achievement of two of the key economic growth initiatives currently being pursued. But in addition to this, transforming and modernizing the transportation system improves equity and accessibility, particularly for low-income residents who are unfortunately the ones that have least access to mass transit systems and, as such, experience long commutes to and from work. An efficient transportation sector also promotes the financial sustainability of the transportation entities, which helps support ongoing debt restructuring efforts. Moreover, given the potential for large injections of capital into the system due to, for example, additional COVID-related stimulus packages, having a structure that ensures the efficient deployment of that capital is fundamental. And finally, implementing these initiatives is feasible, since they do not require additional large capital investments and are more about the efficient use of existing assets, and in some cases, requires the implementation of already existing policies and laws. Next slide, please. So what can be achieved through this reorganization? In addition to supporting key economic activities, even modest improvement targets have a meaningful impact on Puerto Rico citizens. For example, just reducing by half the number of roads that are in poor condition can lead to 70 fewer deaths per year due to traffic accidents. Similarly, reducing by just 4 hours the amount of time spent by commuters in traffic can save them $83 million per year. Not to mention improvement in the quality of life resulting from increases in air quality due to reduced vehicles on the roads. Accordingly, we recommend the board approve the proposed recommendation under Section 205 of PROMESA for the reorganization and transformation of Puerto Rico's transportation sector as described before, and that such recommendation be formally communicated to the governor in writing.
Thank you, Alejandro. Are there any questions or comments? And I'm having trouble with my video screen, but I will oh, there we go. That's going to help. Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, do we have, I guess we don't, do we need yeah, we do need a motion. Do we have a motion to approve this recommendation, that we make these recommendations?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, John. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Betty. As usual, I will ask for a voice vote, starting with all in favor. Please say yes. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions?
David, I'll abstain as a matter of my official vote, but as a Puerto Rican and a person that has taken public transportation and Publicos, it's time that we reform the system.
Thank you, Antonio. The motion passes, which takes us to our 7th item on the agenda, and that's the time and attendance project at the Puerto Rico Department of Education. And I believe Ginorli Maldonado and Natalie Jaresko are going to be presenting that.
Thank you, Chairman Skill. In September of 2020, the FOMB uncovered and disclosed to the public that the Department of Education paid at least $80 million in salaries between 2007 and 2020 to more than 17,500 former employees who should not have been on the agency's payroll. Since then, we've worked with an interagency task force to provide the tools and resources needed to ensure that the tax dollars of Puerto Ricans are used to pay those public servants who actually show up to work. This is accomplished by linking time and attendance records to payroll. Unfortunately, this week, the government decided to delay implementation once again, and therefore to knowingly continue to incorrectly disperse both state and federal payroll funds. Today, we're going to provide an update on the Department of Education's Time and Attendance Project, launched in November 2020 in collaboration with FOMB and Hacienda, and a recommendation for a clawback of funds considering this delay. Can you go to the next slide, please? PRD has a history of chronic absenteeism throughout all staff levels: teachers, school personnel, regional personnel, and central offices, as approximately 41% of the Department of Education's employees used to have time not recorded. We want to be clear that the greatest loss from the absenteeism is the impact on the children, who need their teachers full-time, consistently providing them the education they so dearly need. For over a decade, PRDE has had a time and attendance automated system, Kronos, installed at all schools and all offices, and PRDE has paid approximately $33 million to install and maintain the system since its installation date in 2007. However, PRDE has consistently failed to enforce its use and hold its employees accountable for its misuse or lack thereof. Even though PRDE signed a time and attendance policy on June 2019, which sought to hold its employees accountable, PRDE has since failed to adhere to such policy. For this reason, the certified fiscal plan requires the Department of Education to implement a time and attendance system integrated to payroll to prevent the department from overpaying millions of dollars every year to employees who are not working, and worse yet, to people who do not currently work for the department at all. PRD has repeatedly pledged to implement such a system. As part of FOMB's legal mandate to oversee Puerto Rico's path to fiscal responsibility and therefore to oversee the implementation of the fiscal plan, on September 2020, FOMB disclosed to the public that PRDE paid at least $80 million in salaries between 2007 and 2020 to more than 17,500 former employees who should not have continued to receive pay when they were not working for the department. PRD's dysfunctional payroll process and the lack of a formal, automated, and mandatory time and attendance system means that we don't know how much money PRD actually paid erroneously to former employees. All we know is how much money PRD acknowledges and is trying to collect, which is the 80 million referenced. For this reason, as soon as we found out, we launched an investigation by a forensic accounting firm that is currently ongoing to review the rosters and determine the nature of each individual's active or inactive status at the department. Next slide, please. After having launched the forensic audit with UHY, we began an interagency task force to provide the tools and resources needed to ensure that the tax dollars of Puerto Ricans are used to pay those hardworking and dedicated public servants who actually show up to work and give so much of themselves to the children. This is accomplished by linking time and attendance records to the payroll system. Currently, time and attendance is not connected to payroll, thus the paychecks do not reflect any time off, whether sick leave or vacation or absenteeism. It all gets paid. The system does not reflect timely departures of employees, whether simply discontinuing their service to the department, retiring, or passing away. The Department of Education needs to implement the automated mandatory time and attendance system defined in the fiscal plan, and which the Department of Education itself committed to implement during the Oversight Board's public hearing on education in November 2019. On September 30th of last year, FOMB held a press conference to present to the people of Puerto Rico findings of wrongful payments made and our commitment to ensure that the situation gets rectified and the limited resources available to the government of Puerto Rico are used for the civil servants who actually show up to work and are doing the hard work. As such, on November 2020, FOMB began supporting the department in the time and attendance project in coordination with the FOMB and Hacienda. The project seeks to fully implement PRD's time and attendance policy, as I said, enforce the use of PRD's existing time reporting system, and ensure that payroll systems only issue paychecks to active employees who record their time and attendance. This is a process that frankly is necessary across all government agencies. Time and attendance reports from the government provide useless information as a result of data not being generated, not collected, and not available. Only the Department of Hacienda successfully integrates time and attendance to payroll, and the Department of Public Safety, which is in the process of integrating the systems as well. This is something that must be automated across government to ensure fiscal accountability and to direct all available resources to actual service delivery. I repeat again, this is not only a fiscal issue, this directly impacts the well-being of public school students. Students are unable to effectively engage in school or receive quality, consistent education without a teacher present, something that can only be measured through the use and enforcement of an effective time and attendance system. The original timeline of the project envisioned starting with a pay period of December 16 to December 31st, 2020. All employees would be required to record their attendance as a condition to get paid, and those who fail to properly record their attendance would receive payroll discounts for time not recorded on a subsequent paycheck. Please go to the next slide. As shown in this slide, although the project has made some progress, the government failed to finalize the implementation. So there has been no financial savings to date. Some of the key findings are 71% reduction in the number of employees with time not recorded since the project began. 93% of employees have signed an acknowledgement of the time and attendance project, and the consequences for not properly recording their attendance. Both of these milestones highlight that the communication strategy implemented to date works. In addition, since the project began, 973 employees were identified as inactive by supervisors at the Department of Education, but are unfortunately still being paid. This is 2% of PRD's total headcount and represents annualized cost of $27.3 million. The Department of Education claims to have already removed 499 of these 973 employees from payroll, while 474 inactive employees have yet to be removed from payroll. However, given the discount system has not been implemented, that means that 474 are still being paid despite knowledge of their inactive status. In addition, during the January 15th pay cycle, another 295 employees have been flagged as potentially inactive employees for a total of 769 pending corrections. Had the project been implemented, the expected financial impact for the pay period ended January 15 would be as follows. $1.63 million in time not recorded, which should have been payroll savings to 5,491 employees that did not fully record their time in accordance with PRDE's time and attendance policy. Out of the 5,491 employees affected, 769 have already been flagged as inactive, terminated, deceased, or unknown. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see the breakdown for the implied payroll discounts that should have been reflected for the pay period ended January 15th, 2021, based on the reported number of employees that did not record time according to the department's time and attendance policy. As you can see, the majority, 70% of the implied discounts comes from employees that did not record their time and attendance for over a week, meaning that more than 50% of their work time was unrecorded, while 12% of the implied discounts are for employees that did not record their time and attendance for 1 day or less. The department currently has approximately 45,000 employees. Therefore, the number of employees with time not fully recorded for the pay period ended January 15 is 12%, which represents a significant reduction of time not recorded achieved thanks to this project. Next slide, please. The consequences of not implementing this project are significant on both state and federal funds that continue to be misused. FOMB estimates that in fiscal year 21, the Department of Education could incorrectly disburse at least $46 million to individuals who are inactive or absent without proper justification unless the automated mandatory time and attendance project is implemented. To be more specific, from July 1st to December 31st, 2020, the first half of the fiscal year, PRDE disbursed $27.4 million to approximately 20,000 employees that did not properly record their time and attendance. As mentioned previously, for the pay period ended January 15th, PRDE will disburse $1.6 million to approximately 5,500 employees that also failed to record their time and attendance properly for the past 2 weeks. That represents $28 million already disbursed to date in fiscal year 21 without recorded time and attendance. Now, assuming PRDE continues to have the same amount of time not recorded as it did for the pay period ended January 15th, for the remainder of the fiscal year, PRDE will potentially incorrectly disburse an additional $17.9 million. As such, by the end of this fiscal year, the Department of Education will have incorrectly disbursed at least $46 million to individuals who are inactive, deceased, retired, or simply decided not to show up to work or failed to record their time. The estimated amount can and probably will continue to increase if the department continues to delay the project, as the mandatory nature of recording time and attendance has no consequences at this time. Next slide, please. While the project was ready to be launched by the December 31st pay period, and we were eager to do so, the designated Secretary of Education, Ms. Elba Abonte Santos, requested to delay the discount phase for one additional pay cycle, which is until January 15th, 2021, to allow her and her team to implement a communication strategy. FOMB understood the need and approved this request solely for one additional pay cycle. The Department of Education's designated secretary committed to launch the project starting with the pay period of January 1st to January 15th, 2021, which is payable on February 15, 2021. Unfortunately, this week, the government decided to delay the implementation of the project once again, and therefore to continue knowingly incorrectly dispersed funds, state and federal payroll funds. Considering that the Department of Education's payroll budget is the largest amongst all Commonwealth agencies, with $1.36 billion allocated in a combination of state and federal funds, the FOMB disagrees with the continued delays to finalize the implementation of this project. If inactive employees represent 2% of the total headcount, approximately 27 million of payroll has been paid to inactive employees instead of being available to the hardworking teachers and other employees in the system. Incremental losses will continue based on employees absent without proper justification. It is our understanding that the government is requesting this delay in order to undertake yet another communication strategy, which was the same explanation for the first delay requested in early January 2021. Keep in mind that, as mentioned earlier, 93% of the Department of Education employees already signed an acknowledgement regarding project awareness and the consequences for not recording their time and attendance, proving the communication strategy implemented so far has been very efficient and comprehensive. To date, we await a firm commitment and official date to implement the project from the government. You can go to the next slide, please. The FOMB cannot allow the government to continue to incorrectly disburse public funds. Therefore, we recommend to the board the following: clawback of $30 million from the department payroll budget to an OMB custody account. The $30 million is calculated based on the following: $12.3 million for the salaries of inactive employees identified, the 769 individuals, which represents almost 2% of total employees from January 16th to June 30th, 2021. Second, $17.5 million for the funds the Department of Education will incorrectly disburse in pay cycles from January 16th to June 30th, 2021, assuming the same amount of time not recorded as in the pay period ended of January 15th, 2021. PRDE must report to the appropriate regulatory or law enforcement agency all incorrect payments issued to date, as determined by the forensic audit currently being performed in order to investigate potential individual legal liability. In the event the $30 million are in a clawed back, the Department of Education's fiscal year 2022 general fund payroll appropriation will be adjusted accordingly. This concludes my presentation. Thank you. If there are any questions.
Thank you, Janorli. Are there questions or comments on these Department of Education issues and the time and attendance problems?
Trying to raise my hand as quickly as I can.
Go ahead, Betty, and then we have
Sure.
Antonio and then the governor.
First, I want to start by acknowledging Antonio Medina. Thank you initially, and I didn't, for claiming the importance of education on the island. So thank you for that. And I look forward to working with you on this very critical issue as not only somebody that did benefit from my early years of education on the island, but continue to, and that set the stage for the rest of my educational career. I heard you say the word, I kept thinking of the word accountability, and I kept thinking of all the work that we're trying to do in terms of looking at how dollars are used. And I can't help but think about the other word you use in this presentation, which was dysfunctional. And that is a very, very alarming, critical term to be used for something, a structural issue of time and attendance policy. That is always a part of any institution, accounting for time and attendance. But it's particularly disconcerting to think of that investment and how not only financially, but the impact that investment has on our biggest investment, which should be our children, our students, in terms of our economic development. So with that, I'm particularly disturbed that we keep moving the goalposts. I'm particularly disturbed that that we need more time. You indicated about communication. This is something that if it's already been done, you talked about the 30 million. I think this is a major priority, maybe because of the field that I'm in. And I think that this is something that has to be done. It should have been done yesterday, but I certainly think that has to be done with a sense of urgency, and it has to be done now. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. We have Antonio and then the governor and then Andrew. Antonio?
Thank you, David. I have to say that to me, this is a total outrage. It's the worst kind of corruption because it's stealing the future of our children. During 2017 to 2018, many children lost most of the school year, given the issues of lack of energy, lack of water, and lack of services during the hurricane. During the year 2019 to 2020, many kids throughout the island lost at least a good portion of the second semester because of safety issues in our schools due to the earthquakes. And now during 2020 to 2021, starting really with the last part of the first semester of 2019-2020, our kids have not been able to receive the right level of education because we don't have the technology, perhaps their families don't have their means. And what we're doing right now is we're creating a generation that does not have the education that they need and require to survive in the current work environment. Therefore, I think that if anything, just like we just created an emergency on women's safety in Puerto Rico, and I acknowledge the governor for that, and I support that decision, we need to declare an emergency on the state of the education of our children. We cannot live in a society that only the people that have the means to send their kids to private schools have the opportunity for their children to be successful in the future. And whether it's the politics, red, blue, or whatever else, or the current state of the education department, our children are being robbed the opportunity to have a future in our economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Governor Pierluisi?
I'll be straightforward. This time and attendance project will be implemented. I'll make sure that it is implemented. I'll instruct the Secretary of Education accordingly. And I anticipate that she'll be addressing this topic publicly at the beginning of the next week. I hadn't seen this report until now. But one thing I'll say is that the clawback that you're proposing will have to be adjusted because it'll be implemented way before the date. If I read the clawback accurately, it assumes that the department will not be implementing this from January 16 through June 30th, 2021, and computes everything that would be improperly paid out for that period of time. That's not going to be the case. I'll make sure that that's not the case. So count on it. Obviously, those who have been collecting paychecks without working for the government have incurred unlawful conduct, and they'll have to pay one way or the other. If we need to go back and collect whatever was paid out improperly, we will. And if there was any kind of scheme here, corrupt scheme, I'll deal with it as well, because I'm a former attorney general, and I'm a law and order guy, and not because I say so, just because I have shown so. And so just rest assured that we'll deal with this.
Thank you, Governor. It's very encouraging to see the sense of urgency that you have on this. It's crazy that people who are not working are getting paid. Andrew?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I share the outrage of my fellow board members at what we're seeing here in the Department of Education. What I don't feel, though, is surprise. After 4 years of observing the government of Puerto Rico in action, this doesn't shock me at all to see it. This was something that had taken place, as far as I understand, for 13 years. The government of Puerto Rico, over successive administrations controlled by different parties, had paid $33 million for a time and attendance software system, but by failing to implement it, ended up paying $80 million to people who are not working. It is, this is just indicative of poor governance. Government isn't about simply making spending decisions, saying we want to spend this and that here. It is about making the system work right. It is about managing the workforce. It is making sure that the people get value for the tax dollars that they're paying. I will be equally surprised if we don't see similar attendance problems happening outside the Department of Education. I mean, it's perhaps different systems. I will be shocked if we don't see it there. And I think this goes back to an issue that was raised during our discussion of reprogramming. It's very easy, I think, for people, and it's understandable for people working in government to feel that the board and its staff and the various advisors are intrusive, that they micromanage the government. What I'll say is I can guarantee you that if the board and its staff and advisor were not micromanaging this issue, the time and attendance problem would not have come to light. It would not be publicly addressed. It is just, we see this with the difficulty the government's had in issuing audited financials. We see it in the difficulty the government's had in getting on top of the permitting system. We simply need better governance, better management of how the government works. And that it's just a major priority, but people have to really, really devote time and attention to it, because it doesn't have to be this way. It is not. If you go to states in the mainland, they are not paying thousands of people for not working. That takes money away from the kids of Puerto Rico. It takes money away from the bondholders who deserve some repayment of their debt, and it's an insult to all the teachers and other staff who are out there working. So, this is something which I think it is easy to get outraged about, but I think these sorts of examples of mismanagement are myriad, and we really just need better focus on them all around.
Thank you, Andrew. Antonio, is that an old hand or a new comment?
My apologies. I already made my comment. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Is there a motion to approve the staff recommendation that's just been presented to us?
I make a motion.
Thank you, Betty. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thanks, John. As always, I'll do a voice vote, starting with all in favor. Please say yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions?
As mentioned before, I'll abstain, but in this specific case, I fully support the implementation of the time and assessment systems. And further, like I said before, we need to talk about declaring an emergency on education in Puerto Rico. This subject cannot wait much longer. We have urgency on ensuring that our kids have a future.
Thank you, Antonio. I personally completely agree. And referring back to a comment you made about missed school work earlier in the fall, or missed school days, we looked into this and determined that as of since Hurricane Maria, an average Puerto Rico school child has missed 31 weeks of school, has basically missed a year of school. And that is something that has to change.
Unacceptable. I think as a board, we really need to take this issue and work closely with Governor Pierluisi, who I'm sure will be aligned in working together to get the children of Puerto Rico the right education and resources that they need.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, to add to Mr. Medina's comment and Andrew's comment, I joined this board as an educator, knowing what I know about not only the dysfunction, but also knowing that the children of Puerto Rico, as I said, deserve a quality education, and more importantly, a quality system that reflects opportunities, not only in the economy as contributors, but given, as you said, 159 days. And that's just not only talking about the education, talk about the trauma, talk about the isolation, talk about all the other issues, mental health, that need to be part of the equation. And again, I am on this board, obviously, to support that work from somebody that does this on an everyday basis. And so thank you for the opportunity to speak to this issue.
Thank you, Betty. And it will be great blessing,
Mr. Chairman,
for us and for just a second, Arthur, and for the people of Puerto Rico to have your expertise on this on a day in and day out basis. I think Arthur Gonzalez would like to say something, and then I'd like to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that this issue about time and attendance, this on curing the problem and improving education and all its virtues, is also significant in this whole approach to Puerto Rico in terms of economic development. Economic development, as essential it is also dependent on encouraging people to come to Puerto Rico and invest their capital in a structure, in a governmental structure that is efficient and has a good educational system. Puerto Rico has an excellent higher educational system. It really needs to improve this, to bring workers into newly opened industries and developing industries, expanding industries. You really can't have an efficient, effective, and satisfactory system without a sound educational system. I think I go back to the first board meeting I believe we had in Puerto Rico. I remember a young man tragically standing up and saying he wants to stay in Puerto Rico. He doesn't want to go to Florida. He wants to bring his family up here. He wants to educate his family. And he wants us as a board to do something to save that for him and others on the island. So I applaud this effort to address this and other efforts, and think it works hand in hand with the overall goal of economic development.
Thank you, Arthur. I remember that comment as well, and it really was kind of comment that sends a chill down your spine, because it really shows just how much is at stake with these issues. Governor?
Already said that the time and attendance project will be implemented. I would like to add the following. I assumed office on January 2nd, but I have been very outspoken about the tragedy that Puerto Rico is facing because of the impact of the pandemic in our public education system. And I have been outspoken ever since the pandemic came to Puerto Rico. The difference between Puerto Rico and other places is that in Puerto Rico, the students didn't have computers. Most of them didn't. No, pretty much all of them didn't when the pandemic arrived. Teachers, only some of them had computers. None had been adequately trained. So the concept of remote learning in Puerto Rico is not a real concept. Even as we speak, now the students have the computers, the teachers have the computers, but the training hasn't been done. On top of it, in excess of 400,000 households in Puerto Rico do not have adequate access to the internet. So even if they have the computers, they need to find hotspots, or they would have to go to the schools to actually be connected to the net. So that's reality, and we need to deal with it. Apart from that, and I have been very outspoken about it, we have been using in Puerto Rico the public broadcast channels have been used at my recommendation to try to make up for this lack of technology in the public sector, in the education public system. And what I have been saying now for several months, is that we should be planning for the gradual and partial reopening of our schools. We need to have some interactive or in-person teaching and learning, because it cannot be that we simply leave the kids at home under the current conditions. So I've been saying that. I have gotten some criticism because some believe that Puerto Rico is still in the middle of this pandemic and that we shouldn't be reopening schools. But actually, as President Biden promised, he said that within the first 100 days of his administration, he would like to see the public education systems in the U.S. reopened. I as well, and I have been saying there's already a working group involving Department of Health personnel, the state epidemiologist, as well as the Secretary of Education, the private Schools Association of Puerto Rico. They're all working on protocols and procedures that will be announced in the coming weeks, because my goal is to allow schools to start reopening, both public and private, at some point in the month of March. Obviously, we need to monitor the stats. I'm talking about the incidence of this pandemic in Puerto Rico, the hospitals, the level of contamination we have on the island until then. But that's the goal. So just know that I am very intent on dealing with this issue, because I am the first one who's been saying that this is tragic. I mean, we simply haven't had any significant education process at least the public school level for about a year now, or close to a year. And that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable, and we'll have to deal with it as soon as we can start reopening our schools.
Thank you, Governor. Betty, and then Andrew.
Yeah, I just want to say three quick things specifically to address the governor's point. I have over 3 million students that I'm responsible for, 700 districts, 3 million. I do have rural places, Mr. Governor, very similar, where I've had to use hotspots and so forth and so on. I know that we're working with our governor to create the infrastructure, the broadband, the devices as well, because we too have struggled with some of our devices in professional development. I'm more than willing to work with, have our staff work alongside with the staff that I know Natalie has, and you've got an incredible person who's worked with us in New York in the past, working with Natalie, who understands many of these issues, but they're two separate situations. One is the developing the modalities of in-person, hybrid, as well as remote. But the second issue is the accountability of time and attendance. That's a very, we can mix these two. They're two separate. Let's correct the issue of time and attendance. That's a structural issue. That's an accountability issue. And then let's talk about how we re-engage and make sure that our students are receiving, whether it's hybrid, in-person, or remote. There are many lessons learned throughout that can support your mission, your vision, and certainly give voice to what you're trying to do. And I'm very supportive of that. The problem is that part of this conversation, which I don't want to conflate, is the time of the attendance project speaks to one issue, and that needs to be corrected. And the second part of it is, at the same time, we have to address the opening, we have to address the accountability of students getting a quality education. Two separate issues, and I think both need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Andrew, and then Antonio.
Thanks. I don't want to belabor the discussion too long, but I think it's important for education that we think about the entire system and how it is working, how well managed it is. Obviously, things have gotten more difficult since COVID. We have to think about remote learning, but simply giving students laptops and hotspots is not going to give them a good education system. We can go back to 2016, prior to Hurricane Maria, prior to the bankruptcy of the government of Puerto Rico. And at that point in international education tests, Puerto Rico students had lower test scores than students in Mexico, which is a country with much lower incomes, lower education spending. We had a hearing last year talking about the education system, and we have problems where, money is allocated to buy textbooks, but the books aren't bought. We have money, allocated for maintenance in schools, and yet schools don't have working bathrooms. Again, this goes to the point is top to bottom of how do we manage this system so it is working for the people of Puerto Rico. So my point is simply the easy fixes such as buying thousands of computers is not enough to give people a good education system. It is a day-to-day management problem that, it's a tough problem to solve, but that's what it's going to take to do it.
Thank you, Andrew. Antonio?
Thank you, David. Just another brief comment. I cannot leave this discussion without talking about the 40% of kids that do not finish high school and the 90% of the population in the correctional facilities that do not have a high school degree, because one problem leads to the other. And then we'll talk about security and safety in Puerto Rico and the drug problem, and these are all interrelated. I've been talking to the folks in the Alliance for Alternative Education, and these are a group of NGOs and not-for-profit groups that try to address this problem. But the amount of capacity of these programs is significantly less than the demand for these services. So I think we need to look at education as a holistic approach. The time and attendance issue is just one small issue or one small solution of a much, much broader problem. But that only serves 60% of the population between 14 and 20. The other 40% already left the educational system. And we need 100% of those children to bring a future to Puerto Rico.
Thank you, Antonio. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, so we go to our last substantive issue on the agenda, which is public comments. And I assume Natalie will handle that.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I know we only have 15 minutes left, so whatever I don't get to, we will post on the website with answers. And I will try and group common themes together to save time. We have a series of questions from Victor Torres, from Yereilis Crespo Guinness, from Diane Rodriguez about Act 169, 2020. And the questions are, I would like to know the board's position on the 5-year CRIM incentives for eligible property and stamp exemptions offered by this act. We're in the process of closing our first home. We'd like to know, when will you have the estimate to have the authorization of the extension of this section of the Housing Encouragement Program Transition Act? This is the last step we need to be able to close in the next few days. Can you please sign the extension for the Law 13 of 2018? I have been waiting almost a year for my house, and this benefit will help people like me buying first homes. Please help. So the answer to all of those is that we have not yet received a 204 certification from the government. I'm sure it's in process for Act 169, 2020. As soon as we receive the certification, we will review it and its consistency with regard to the CRIM fiscal plan. The next question has to do with retirement. And I think there are a couple on retirement. So from M. Cruz, if the commencement date for the LUMA contract, this is about the PREPA retirement specifically. If the commencement date for the LUMA contract will be June 2021, the PREPA employees will need to have the detailed information about the options we have with the employees' retirement system. Is LUMA going to make contributions to the PREPA ERS? Are those years working with LUMA going to count for the PREPA ERS so the employees can complete their 30 years of service? Will the employees that decide to move to LUMA's 401k, are they also able to move the employee contribution to the 401k so that they don't have to start at zero? Someone needs to give employees those answers in writing as soon as possible so we have an informative decision and complete the transition. We agree, Ms. Cruz, and these are all important questions that PREPA and the government of Puerto Rico are preparing answers for. LUMA will be complying with all required laws, including the law that relate to the options available to the employees that transfer to LUMA. So, and this one, the next step is for the government to provide clear written guidance so that the PREPA employees that join LUMA can make an informed decision. The next set of pension questions is more general. Rene Gonzalez asks, Mr. Esco, despite many efforts made by the government of Puerto Rico, you are right now leaning towards an early retirement of public employees for the reasons you have explained thoroughly so far. Would you be open to counteroffer with a 1-year salary plan for any resignation instead to reduce the government's payroll? Thanks for your excellent work so far. Jose Villanueva says, greetings. I am a public employee and we have many colleagues from different government offices who want to know the status of Retirement Law 80 that was signed in August 2021. Our governor has not reported anything about it yet. I hope you can provide us with information. Thanks and blessings. And Edith Latorre says, please give the status of the approval of Law 80 on the retirement public employees of the PR government. So the answer to these questions on Law 80 in particular has to do with the work that we are doing right now and collaborating with the government to determine how, if at all, those laws can be implemented within and consistently with the fiscal plan. Since December 15th, the government has confirmed that they're not implementing the laws until they complete further analysis and provide data and work with us collaboratively to agree on whether or how implementation can occur at all. We acknowledge the intent of the government to proceed with that evaluation, and we're awaiting the final analysis. The next question has to do with renewable energy. Luis Bacot. Good morning. Oh, Luis, hello. Good morning. During the FOMB's 23rd public meeting held on December 18th, Ms. Jaresko stated in her response to a question posted by Cliff Webb, president of Greenbrier Capital, that she would include in the agenda for today's meeting a discussion on the FOMB's rejection of nearly 450 megawatts in renewable energy generation from the 16 solar projects approved by PREPA and PREP. In what seems to be an oversight, this issue does not appear to be on the agenda today. When does the FOMB plan to address this very critical matter? John asks, how specifically does limiting the use of renewables help the people of Puerto Rico who have been so severely devastated over the past several years? What are the benefits of maintaining the status quo of fossil fuel regarding the production of new jobs, healthier environment, and reaching the stated goals for Puerto Rico over the next few years and several decades? Roberto asks, I read Julian Herencia's informative letter and concur with his point of view. My question is, when are you going to stop wasting the taxpayers' hard-earned money with delays? Are the delays due to your ineptitude? Is tomorrow the mantra for job security on the island? Shameful behavior indeed. Mr. Shangala has written several pages of comments, but all about these legacy solar PPOAs. We will post the full question, but I think the answers are all quite similar. One more from Tom. Please advise why FOMB is not approving the solar energy projects for the well-being of Montalva, Puerto Rico. Why is it dragging on for so long? Why does FOMG reject solar projects? Please provide justification with real data. So first of all, I want to assure you that the board in no way is rejecting solar or renewables or in any way interfering with the implementation in full of the energy law of Puerto Rico, which requires renewables and requires meeting certain levels of renewables by a certain date specific. With regard to the specific projects mentioned on the 16 renewable projects that the board rejected and sent back to PREPA to identify the 150 most objectively meeting the criteria of shovel ready. We continue to await for PREPA to deliver their decision with regard to the 150 megawatts. And as soon as they have delivered the proposed contracts, representing the best qualified proponents, we will then do the analysis and make the final decision. And at that time, we will bring it to this board as we did the contracts earlier today for approval. So Mr. Bacot, that as soon as we get those contracts, it will be on the next board agenda. We have not received the final yet. Again, the board does not limit deployment of renewables or favor any other resources. Our focus is for it to be procured in a competitive and transparent manner, promote confidence from market participants, and ensure the lowest possible cost to taxpayers while being consistent with the fiscal plan. The next question comes from Andrew Faust, a McKay Shields analyst. At the end of 2019, the Oversight Board approved a settlement to discharge over 92% of Series 2011 prefab ports bonds with a group of institutional investors. There is still $15.28 million of notional par amount on the prefab ports bonds left in retail investor hands that were likely unaware and did not participate in the private settlement FOF conducted with the Oversight Board's blessing. Since FOF and the Oversight Board did not conduct the settlement through the PROMESA Title VI restructuring, the remaining retail holders have been stranded. While a portion of the 2011 prefab ports bonds did receive a recovery through the new DRA GDB bonds, a significant portion of the remaining port bonds continue to go unpaid. What steps does the Oversight Board and FOF plan to take to address the remaining investors who still hold the 2011 prefab ports bonds? PREFA, as you correctly mentioned, is neither a Title VI nor a Title III entity, so extending the proposal to the remaining 8% of investors is in the hands of a FOF. In the event that a FOF proposes to do a supplemental offering and submits an application to the Oversight Board consistent therewith, the Oversight Board will promptly consider it at one of its board meetings. Andrew Faust, a McKay Shields analyst, says, as part of the PSA or Plan Support Agreement entered into between the FOMB and groups of creditors, the Oversight Board agreed to inform investors when the PSA attainment threshold of 70% was reached. The last update regarding the 70% attainment threshold was in early April of 2020. Would the Oversight Board or Proskauer please provide the current amount of GO and PBA bond claims that are now part of the PSA and what the percentage that comprises overall GO bond claims and PBA bond claims? So, Mr. Faust, as a reminder, in March of 2020, the Oversight Board, given the severe effect of the COVID pandemic on Puerto Rico and in close consultation with the government of Puerto Rico, asked the U.S. District Court to adjourn all considerations of the proposed plan of adjustment until further notice. And notwithstanding such adjournment, additional parties have joined the PSA and existing parties have increased their holdings subject to the PSA, but the threshold has not been reached. Additionally, under the guidance of the court-appointed mediation team, the Oversight Board, the government of Puerto Rico, and the creditors of the Commonwealth have commenced negotiations in mediation for an amended plan of adjustment and amended PSA that would reflect the effect of this pandemic on Puerto Rico. Unless extended by an order of the court, the Oversight Board shall file an amended plan of adjustment, or at least a term sheet, by February 10th, as ordered by the court. Another question from Victor Gonzalez. PREPA is spending millions of dollars every month on consultants and lawyers, yet the audited financial statements are not getting done. Doesn't not having audited financial statements impact the use of federal funds? Do they impact the plan of adjustment? PREB, the regulator, denied PREPA's 10-year plan. Will PREPA now need to pay its consultants for a new 10-year plan that does comply with the IRP? Who ends up paying for all these duplicate efforts? Is it fair to stakeholders that money is spent over and over and over to pay lawyers and consultants for work that is not useful? Really, this is a question for PREPA and the government. I don't have an answer for you, Mr. Gonzalez. We look forward to getting the audited financial statements as soon as is possible. The concerns that the regulator has raised are public with regard to the 10-year CapEx plan. And one of the things that we have tried to do together with the government is minimize the risk of any federal funds being subject to de-obligation in the future. One of the reasons that LUMA was contracted and the P3 was entered into was specifically because of their worldwide experience in energy industry capital investments, with the intention that they would help to ensure that these investments are made on time, on budget, in accordance with Puerto Rico law and federal law. Let's see here. Last one from Andrew Faust, McKay Shields analyst. According to the Puerto Rico Central Office of Recovery, Reconstruction, and Resiliency, or CORE3, approximately $18.029 billion of federal recovery funds have been dispersed to the Commonwealth since 2017. That number seems high relative to the amount of actual funds that have been reported in the press to restore the island following the hurricanes. Does the Oversight Board have any estimates on how much federal recovery money has actually been spent on the island since the hurricanes? Mr. Faust, we don't oversee the federal funds. We do, of course, closely monitor the disbursement of the federal funds related to disasters. And the $18 billion figure that is on the CORE3 website, which is accurate, is important to note that it includes many items that are not necessarily related to reconstruction. So it's not that $18 billion has gone into reconstruction, because it includes money that went into emergency work, debris removal, just after the hurricane, as an example. It includes all the sums of individual assistance, not public assistance, but individual assistance provided to citizens after the hurricane, and also administrative costs. If you look at CORE3's transparency portal, recovery.pr, it'll allow you to filter by programs, categories, and you can look at the amount dispersed for what is classified as FEMA permanent work, which I think is the goal of your question. How much went into permanent work? And permanent work is just slightly above $150 million, 150. That's for reconstruction of roads, bridges, public buildings, parks, recreational facilities, utilities. From CDBG-DR funds, approximately $170 million has been dispersed. The pace of disbursements continues to be a point of concern for all. I know the governor has spoken about it consistently, and we share the governor's and everyone else's concerns to move this money forward. In part, what we described today in ensuring that we have the cost share available for those FEMA funds to roll out. I think I've covered all. We'll again post all the questions and the answers again, and if anyone has any questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Natalie. Are there any other matters that we need to discuss today from any of the board members or Governor?
Yes, quickly, I have asked Omar Marrero to contact and Natalie Jaresco to arrange a meeting between board staff, OMB, the head of OMB of Puerto Rico, Omar, our team, our top team, to try to expedite or improve the reprogramming approval process. Just one fact, I inquired, and the request for the Aguadilla Airport project matter or reprogramming was made by OMB on December 21st. So it has taken 5 weeks to get the denial, simply to be told that we need to look for another source of funds. I'm using that as an example. I know that many times you do this quickly, and many times and there are all kinds of reasons. That's what the meeting is for, to make sure that for important reprogramming items, we simply deal with them quickly. I mean, that you basically tell us, no, withdraw it, submit it again, just give us another source of funds. I mean, we just need to, do better. Collectively, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm new here in a way. I've been in the office for 3 weeks. And again, on this education thing, I mean, one thing I would appreciate in the future is if you give me a heads up on something like this personally, because all of a sudden to participate in this meeting and get all this presentation about this lack of execution on the part of the Department of Education, when I have been just 3 weeks in office, it's not acceptable. That's not the kind of relationship I want to have with the board. And so I want to be on record about it. But count on it. It'll be done. It'll be done. It'll be implemented. The TNA will be implemented. And so I, again, look forward to participating in future board meetings. Count on me. Public meetings, non-public meetings, whatever, because this is what we should do. We should work collaboratively, and we should make sure that we put Puerto Rico's fiscal house in order, we restructure its debt, and we put it on a path for growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Natalie?
Governor, with all due respect, I have no intention to surprise you, but we've been talking about this every single week for 2 months with your Secretary of Education, with her team, with AFAF, with your CFO, including with your Chief of Staff. So, I did not mean in any way to surprise you, but I felt that we had been, daily, weekly, twice a week talking to many people in the administration, and that they would be aware. I apologize that you felt it was a surprise.
Well, all I'll say is it's not 2 months. I mean, I have been in office just for 3 weeks. But again, it's a different administration. We're coming in with a different attitude. We definitely want to do better. And so count on me again for working in good faith with the board for the benefit of the people of Puerto Rico.
Thank you, Governor. And it seems to me this is one of the real benefits of you being on the board, is we can talk about these things in real time and principle to principle. So again, I thank you for carving out 3 hours. And I suspect this won't be the last 3-hour meeting we have to meet with us and to talk about these issues. I think we're finished with the items on our agenda, so I will move that we adjourn the meeting. Will somebody second that motion?
Second.
Let's show what the meeting to go on forever. Thank you, Andrew. As always, I will start by asking if all in favor would please say yes.
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 All in favor say no. Or excuse me, all opposed say no. Any opposed say no. And any abstentions? And no abstentions. And I think everybody voted in favor, so the meeting is now adjourned. We will have a press conference immediately after we all get off this Zoom for those who were involved with that. So thanks everybody for a very productive, very candid, very good meeting. Take care.